Good evening, and I call to order the Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017 meeting of the Portsmouth City Council, and I'll ask my colleagues to stand as Reverend Gregory Yancey of New Morning Star Missionary Baptist Church gives our invocation, and then I'll ask everybody to stand as Councilman Bill Moody leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Our gracious Father, we come this afternoon as we gather in this place. Father, we ask you now, Lord, to be with us. Ask for, Lord, even now that your wisdom, your love, your knowledge, and your grace and justice would abide with us. Father, we thank you now for our mayor of our city council that works beside his side. Father, lead them tonight. Guide them in a direction that needs to be carried out for our city. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll ask the member of council to indicate their presence by electronically by voting yes. And Madam Deputy Clerk, we do have a quorum. And ladies and gentlemen, Councilwoman Simmons is sick and our city clerk is on a well-deserved vacation. The first item is approval of minutes. We have the minutes of a call meeting of August the 7th, 2017. We have the minutes of a call meeting of August the 8th, 2017, and the minutes of a regular meeting of August the 8th, 2017. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve that's been duly seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And Madam Deputy Clerk, the motion carries. At this point, I'm going to ask the Deputy Clerk to read our protocol for speakers, please.
City Council rules require a limit of up to 5 minutes to speak. As you approach the speaker's podium, you will notice a timer. At the beginning of your 5 minutes, you will see a green light. 4 minutes into your remarks, you will see a yellow light. At 5 minutes, you will see a red light, hear a beep, and we ask that you conclude your comments at that time. While speakers have an opportunity to address council on matters of public concern, all comments should be made in a manner that respects the seriousness of the forum and should not be made in a belligerent, sarcastic, or demeaning fashion. A speaker who fails to observe this basic rule of decorum will be deemed out of order and not allowed to conclude her comments.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next item of business is a consideration of the adoption of a special resolution that speaks to what has happened in our country, what has happened in our state, over the last couple of weeks. And Madam Clerk, would you read the entire resolution, please?
A resolution in support of the City of Charlottesville in reaffirmation of the City of Portsmouth's commitment to the values of equality, inclusion, diversity, and rule of law. Whereas the violent racist and radical events that took place on August 11th and 12th, 2017 in Charlottesville were an attack on all citizens of the Commonwealth. And whereas the City of Portsmouth stands in solidarity with the City of Charlottesville in the rule of law. And whereas the cities of Virginia play a unique role in our Commonwealth as communities of hope, diversity, and progress. And whereas white nationalism, white supremacism, neo-Nazism, and other hateful ideologies are a real threat to the social fabric of our Commonwealth and our country. And whereas free speech is a cornerstone of every right that we have as Americans, however, these organizations promote agendas that are in conflict with our nation's principles of liberty and justice for all and rule of law. And whereas the Commonwealth of Virginia is making progress toward bridging divisions and uniting communities so that our children may inherit a better, more tolerant world. And whereas now is the time for all citizens to reject hatred, stand up for democracy, and stand together against those who threaten our brothers and sisters. And whereas the city of Portsmouth enjoys a rich diversity of people who live and work here, sustaining and supporting our vibrant community. And whereas the City Council wishes to preserve, protect, and ensure that all people are welcome, safe, and able to fully participate as enfranchised citizens of the city. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia, that the City of Portsmouth rejects and denounces violent extremism and terrorism of all kinds, including racist and bigoted ideologies espoused by white nationalists, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and other hate groups. And be it further resolved that the Council of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia, encourages all citizens to stand in solidarity with the citizens of Charlottesville by reaffirming our city's commitment to the values of equality, inclusion, diversity, and rule of law.
Thank you, ma'am. So that we can have this matter before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And it looks like we may have to do a roll call vote.
You have a speaker.
Pardon me?
There's a speaker.
There is a speaker?
Yes.
Okay. And who made that be?
Yes, it's on the list. Monica Boston.
Is that Margaret Mitchell? Is that who you have as a speaker? Okay. All right. Bear with us. We do have speakers that have signed up to speak on this, and the first speaker is Mark Gadolgi-Yotrowski. Sir, you've got 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow interested parties. I am in sympathy with the objectives of this resolution, but I have concerns about some of the phrasing. I think the specific identification of white nationalism, white supremacism, neo-Nazism at a couple of points in this resolution do not really give the big picture. I read the intent of this as a condemnation of hatred, condemnation of intolerance. And I think that that is best conveyed by not going into specifics. The people who were involved in the original demonstrations in Charlottesville are poster children for the problem. The other issue I have with this is that it flies in the face of the idea of loving the sinner and hating the sin. You are creating marginalized categories here, which is not healthy. If you really want to embrace all Americans and the diversity of American opinion, some of it is bigoted, some of it is ignorant, And the only way to deal with ignorance and bigotry is to deal in truth and love. So marginalizing individuals who identify with these groups is not going to get us to our goal. If you truly want unity, you have to respect every individual. You do not have to agree with their ideas, and you do not have to tolerate violence. When you cross the line from expression of views to acting violently, then you have gone into territory where government has a legitimate interest in preventing violence, in protecting everybody's safety. So I think this should be considered further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Christ Fonts. Okay, the next speaker is Peter Raffetto. Do what? Oh. Sir, will you identify yourself when you come, and you got 5 minutes, because we have two speakers that are queuing up. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Peter Raffetto, resident Portsmouth, 416 Dinwiddie Street in Old Town. I'm actually here to talk, though, about, I was called up
Oh,
here.
I'm sorry, sir. This is my mistake.
Okay,
We do have a lot of speakers tonight,
sure.
and I've got you down on the wrong spot.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my apologies to both of you. I think that wraps up all the speakers that wanted to speak on the special resolution. Is that correct? Okay. Now we do have a motion. The motion was duly seconded. The motion was to approve and adopt the resolution. Are you ready for the motion? Consideration. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes electronically. Opposed, no. And Madam Clerk, the motion carries unanimously. We now have the consideration of an amendment to the agenda to rearrange it, and the chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I move that we add an item to the agenda.
And we're considering the rearrangement of the agenda.
Or suspend the current agenda.
What's the nature of your motion?
My motion is to rearrange or suspend the agenda. I think they pretty much one and the same. Then we'll come back and make a motion to add this specific item to the agenda.
The chair is interested in a motion to consider items 17, 368, 369, 370, and 371 at this moment so we can get them out of the way. Is there such a motion?
Yes, I can
Okay.
go ahead and read them at this time, Mayor.
Well, we just read the items, so we'll move items 17, 368, 369, 370, 371 to this point on the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Opposed, no. And the motion carries. We have an email that we read during work session from the chairman of the school board. And Madam Clerk, would you read that email?
Good morning, City Council members. I'm writing with an appeal, and I hope you will consider my request. I know we don't see eye to eye on school funding. I know we have been passionate on both sides, but but I'm asking that we set aside our differences and come together to do what's best for children and the city. My colleagues and I strongly believe the city's latest recommendation will not be in the best interest of our students. Dr. Bracy has been working diligently with the city administration on budget matters throughout the year, and we want to keep the lines of communication open. We'd like to share our concerns with you in a sit-down meeting between the school board and the council. I plead with you to hold off on tonight's vote on the reappropriation, even if just for a week, and give us a chance to talk as school and city officials. This is such a critical time for our schools. We'll have 4 more schools fully accredited, which last year we had 8 and now we have 12. Students will return in 2 weeks. This morning, I had an opportunity to welcome 200 new teachers to Portsmouth. They were excited to be working in an urban school division, which has unique needs. We want to keep that momentum. We also understand the city has needs and expenses, and we're willing to listen. Please let me know if you will consider this request and hold off the vote until we've had a chance to come together. Also, as City Council requested last night, I have attached copies of our full reappropriation proposal that lists our school needs. Sincerely, Claude Parent, Portsmouth City School Board Chairman.
So that we can get this matter before us, the chair will entertain a motion that we grant the chairman's request to postpone items 17, 368, 369, 370, and 371 to the next council meeting, and direct the city manager to work, and her staff to work with the school superintendent to resolve this matter. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, we do have a motion on the floor, and I'll restate the motion, that items 17, 368, 369, 370, and 371 be postponed to the next regular city council meeting, and council directs the city manager, her staff, to meet with the school superintendent and his staff to advance this matter. And I think Dr. Whitaker, and then I'll call on the city manager. Well, Dr. Whitaker, I'm going to call on the city manager first because I think you've already started.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, as I indicated in the public work session earlier, that Dr. Bracy and I have already set our meetings going forward. We'll be meeting August 28th from 11 a.m. until August 29th from 11 a.m. until August 30th at 2 p.m. until. So we are already planning and moving forward, working together.
Okay, now we have a motion on the table. We're ready for discussion. Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, given that we have the chair of the school board here, if there's no objection from council, would like for him to explain his position publicly so that we can make sure we're clear on what it is he's requesting.
Thank you, sir. Any objection? The chair recognizes School Board Chairman Claude Parent. Sir, would you come to the lectern?
Good evening. Mayor Rowe, Vice Mayor Cherry, council members, and City Manager Patton. On behalf of the Portsmouth School Board, I want to sincerely thank you for delaying your vote this evening on this matter. This gives the superintendent and his staff and the city manager and her staff to work out the differences that we had. I think the Virginia pilot, Dr. Whitaker, summed it up very nicely for both sides, in which they said that stop the tussling in Portsmouth. And they said that what should be clear to all involved is that these quarrels must end, and the bitterness must be set aside for the sake of 15,000 kids heading back to school next month. Portsmouth Public Schools are making improvement slowly and steadily and can ill afford to see petty squabbles and turf wars threaten these gains. This morning, as that she read, I had the opportunity to welcome over 200 new teachers, and they were excited. And I told them, first of all, you don't worry about what you've seen on television or what you might read in the paper. That's politics. That's what we're going to handle. To answer your question, Dr. Whitaker, the reason I reached out to you, all of you, is to give us an opportunity to sit down, reasonable people to sit down and work out what's best for our students and our employees and all of our parents. And I think that having more time, giving you the information, I understand that you had not seen our resolutions, and I attached those resolutions so that you could read all of the information. That would give you time to study and be able to make a decision. So I am, on behalf of the school board tonight, thanking all of you for this opportunity to delay this action so that we can work together. We've got to work together. We can't continue this type of relationship. I know that we both have differences on funding, but we've got to work together and make sure that our number one priority is about student achievement. That's our mission. And the city council, its responsibility, Dr. Whitaker, as you well know, is that you appropriate the funds. Those funds come to the school system, and the school system has the legal responsibility of making sure those funds are used properly and accounted for. Now, we have submitted to council the last 4 years that I have been on the board, and the last 2 years that I've been chair, all of our financial reports. And I have not heard from any of you about any discrepancy that you may have. We've made sure that we've had clean audits. We have done everything to be transparent so that you understand, you know our finances, and we do understand that you have financial issues. And we're not trying to hoard any money. We're trying to use the money that we have to put in the hands of our students the technology that they need to move forward in a technological world. And but again, I want to thank you for allowing us to work this out. You know, at first I asked for the school board and the city council to work together, and this evening Mayor Rowe called me and he said, how about the superintendent and the city manager to work it out? And that's great. So once again, thank you very much for allowing this to happen. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the motion is before us is to postpone and to direct the city manager and her staff to work with the school superintendent. Ready for the question? All in favor of the question? The motion, vote yes. Opposed, no. And Madam Clerk, the motion carries, which brings us to unfinished business. 17-340, use permits. And Madam Clerk, would you read 17-340A, the caption, please?
Yes. Resolution granting a use permit to ZBC LLC to operate a child daycare center at 225 Hatton Street.
Okay. We've had the reading of the caption of the resolution. What is your pleasure? Is there a motion to adopt?
Move for
adoption.
approval.
Okay. We have a motion to approve, and the chair recognizes Vice Mayor Cherry.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said last meeting, I'm a proud member and trustee of Zion Baptist Church, so I will be abstaining from the vote on this.
Thank you. I'm not sure that we picked up the second clearly. Who seconded the motion? We did? Okay. Will you make sure that the minutes reflect that Vice Mayor Cherry is abstaining and recusing himself? You have before you a motion to adopt a resolution that's been read by our clerk, and we do have a speaker. And that is Margaret Mitchell. And ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. My name is Margaret Mitchell, and I reside at 517 Spectator Street, Cavalier Manor. I grew up 2 blocks from where I now reside. I was the 5th child in a family. My mother was a nursing student at IC Norcom High School. My father worked in the shipyard, and I had been placed into a preschool to develop my sense of community. That name of that preschool was Winnie the Pooh Preschool with Miss Barbara Jordan. And there I had many wonderful experiences, first-time experiences. Let me name just a few. Sleeping on an army cot and being covered over with that itchy army blanket. And learning to appreciate Navy beans on that tray. Loving, nurturing environment of teachers who cared, who showed me my first beginnings of many different things. The first field trip, the Enchanted Forest. As a preschooler, all of those things, the sights and sounds, the touches that you received in preschool were your very first beginnings to developing your own community. One of my fondest memories was a student who wasn't like the rest of us, who couldn't walk and talk like the rest of us. She wore a white bib and she really couldn't speak, but we learned empathy and to help and to care for one another. Daycare, preschool, is a place where many of us received our first academic and social beginnings outside of our home. It is also a place where I was introduced to early literacy, rhyme and rhythm, poetry and prose, articulation and inflection, as well as numbers and writing. Allow me to name a few. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. We're all in our places with bright, shiny faces. Oh, this is the way to start a new day. Maresy dotes and dozy dotes and little lambsy divey. I'll let you finish. Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet eating her curds and whey. We learned what vocabulary was. Now I lay me down to sleep. God is great, God is good, and we thank him. I see many of you finishing those statements, so I know you had also wonderful beginnings as well. Let me leave you with one last quote. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men, by Frederick Douglass. This is what the historic Zion Baptist Church are committed to, setting a strong foundation and building strong children. Will all those who are in support of Zion's Child Care Center please stand? Thank you.
Thank you. And we had only one speaker, and we have a motion to adopt. That's been duly seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. Madam Clerk, the motion carries 5-4, 1 abstain. That abstention is Vice Mayor Cherry. Which brings us to unfinished business, item 17340B. And Madam Clerk, would you read the resolution?
Yes. Resolution granting a use permit to New Kern Development LLC to develop and operate not more than 27 units of multifamily housing at 325 through 327 High Street and 341 High Street.
In order to put this matter before us, is there a motion to adopt?
Move for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the resolution that grants the conditional use permit. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And Madam Clerk, the motion carries. Which brings us to City Manager's report and agenda item 17363. Madam Clerk, would you read the caption of the ordinance?
Yes. Ordinance accepting Four for Life program grant funds in the amount of $74,941.36 from the Virginia Department of Health Office of Emergency Medical Services and appropriating said funds in the FY 2018 Grants Fund for use by the Department of Fire, Rescue, and Emergency Services.
Thank you for the reading of the caption. In order to put this before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt the ordinance?
Move for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion that's been duly made and seconded to adopt the ordinance. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the question, please vote yes, opposed no. And Madam Clerk, the motion carries. Which brings us to agenda item 17364, which is a consideration of an ordinance accepting a certain grant. And Madam Clerk, would you read the caption of the ordinance, please?
Ordinance accepting a grant in the amount of $419,364.41 from the Virginia Department of Health and appropriating said funds in the FY 2018 Grants Fund for use by the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Leisure Services for the USDA Summer Food Service Program.
Thank you. In order to put this before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt the ordinance?
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion that's been duly made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And the motion carries. Which brings us to item 17365, which is consideration of a ordinance to amend a certain chapter of the city code. And Madam Clerk, would you read the caption of the ordinance, please?
Ordinance to amend and reordain Chapter 4 of the Code of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia by amending subsection F of Section 4-9 for the purpose of modifying the requirements for tethering of dogs.
Thank you. In order for us to have this before us for our consideration, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. We do have a motion, and we do have registered speakers, and the first speaker is Mark Godalgi-Ostrowski. And sir, you got 5 minutes.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow interested parties. I may jeopardize my reputation as a serious person with this, but those of you who snicker or giggle or laugh at what I'm about to say have an awakening coming when your years become more numerous than they are now. My concern about the phrasing of this particular ordinance relates particularly to people of a certain age. Imagine yourself working in your yard with your dog tethered nearby, and suddenly you are overtaken by an irresistible impulse, and you head off into the house to take a bathroom break. And the impulse is strong enough that you don't have time to do anything but move from where you were to where you need to be. I think there needs to be some accommodation to allow for a momentary absence of this sort without running afoul of the ordinance. Because as the ordinance is now written, it means that you will be in proximity to the animal who is tethered continuously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we do have 2 more speakers. The next speaker is Chris Fonts. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Rowe, Vice Mayor Cherry, and honorable council members. My name is Chris Fontes, and I own a house on Douglas Avenue in Port Norfolk. Like many other Portsmouth residents, I strongly support a full ban on dog chaining because tying up dogs outdoors, even for 3 hours, is cruel and dangerous. Chained dogs have strangled to death after jumping over fences, died of heat stroke after being left in the sun, been shot or poisoned by cruel people, been mauled by stray dogs, and much more. all of these terrible things can happen within just a few minutes of being left alone. And it only takes a few minutes for a curious toddler or a child who doesn't know any better to wander too close to a chained dog who has not been properly socialized, and once that happens, they become very aggressive. The results can be deadly. In the last 14 years, more than 450 people have been severely injured or killed by dogs who were chained. Most of them were children. A ban on chaining would make Portsmouth a kinder, safer community for everyone. Please do the right thing by passing this ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Peter Raffetto. And excuse me if I mispronounce your name. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Rowe, Vice Mayor Cherry, and honorable council members. My name is Peter Raffetto, a resident, Portsmouth, 416 Dinwiddie Street. As a Portsmouth resident, I commend the council for considering a total ban on dog chaining. The city's current 3-hour time limit is difficult to enforce. A total ban on keeping dogs chained would be easier to prosecute, and it would help people understand that chaining is cruel and never acceptable. For many people, chaining just makes it easier to ignore their dogs. As social animals, companionship is what dogs need and crave the most. Being stuck out on a chain deprives them of social interaction, which can make them depressed, anxious, lonely, and even aggressive. And it is also very common for people who chain their dogs to fail to give them proper exercise, food, and water, and shelter. I urge Portsmouth to follow the example of numerous municipalities around the country that have outlawed the cruel practice of chaining dogs altogether. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's our last speaker. The matter is before City Council. Any further discussion? Ready for the motion?
Move adoption.
Yes, we do have a motion on the floor. So we're ready for the question. All in favor of the motion to adopt, vote yes. Opposed, no. And the motion carries 5-1. Which brings us to item 17-366, which is the consideration of an ordinance accepting certain grant funds. And Madam Clerk, would you read the caption of the ordinance, please?
Ordinance accepting a grant in the amount of $382,595 from the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services and appropriating said amount in the FY 2018 Grants Fund for use by the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office for the Victim Witness Program.
Thank you. In order to put this before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt the ordinance?
Move for adoption.
Okay, we have a motion that's been duly seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And Madam Clerk, the motion carries unanimous. Which brings us to item 17-367, which is the consideration of the adoption of another ordinance accepting or making a transfer. Will you read the caption of the ordinance, please?
Yes. Ordinance authorizing the transfer of $134,557.96 from the FY 2018 Social Services Fund to the FY 2018 Grants Fund for the implementation of the Employment for TANF Participants Program.
Ladies and gentlemen, in order to put this before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt the ordinance?
Second.
We have a motion to adopt. It's been duly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Which brings us to item 17-372, which is the consideration and adoption of a resolution pertaining to the authorization to give to the city manager to execute a particular agreement. Will you read the caption of the resolution, please?
Resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a Hampton Roads Water Quality Credit Agreement for the Chesapeake Bay restoration between the city of Portsmouth and the Hampton Roads Sanitation District for the purpose of acquiring water quality credits.
Thank you. In order to put this before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move for adoption.
We have a motion that's been made and duly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to adopt, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And the motion carries 6-0. Which brings us to new business of 17-373, boards and commissions. Vice Mayor Cherry.
May I have no nominations tonight? I do have one, excuse me. I'd like to make a move that we authorize the city manager and attorney to prepare a letter for the governor recommending the reappointment of Luke McCoy to the SIPSA board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Any other items, boards and commissions?
No, sir.
We come to 17-374, which are items submitted by City Council, and the chair recognizes Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. If there is no objection from council, I request that this council directs the city manager to report back to council at the next work session on the necessary steps for moving the Confederate monument from its present location to Cedar Grove Cemetery.
Okay. And you ask if there's any objection from council to ask the city manager to do that.
Right.
Any objection?
Yes.
Okay. Chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
Yes, I do object on the grounds that I don't think Portsmouth should be falling in line with those across the nation who are not only removing Confederate monuments, but it's been expanded into removing history. Indeed, the lunge to expunge history began even before the infamous events in Charlottesville earlier this month, but it's certainly taken on new momentum in the wake of the events in Virginia. New Orleans, of course, was home to the much debate when their mayor, Mitch Landrieu, led the removal of 4 Confederate-related memorials, even though 2 of them were erected to celebrate post-war reconciliation. In May, their newspaper reported the anti-slave era had extended to the city's famous homage to French mystic Joan of Arc, who of course was a 15th century Catholic saint, had nothing to do with slavery. Somebody spray painted the words "tear it down" on the statue's base. And in 2016, an angry mob demanded that the American Museum of Natural History in New York remove a statue of former President Teddy Roosevelt. Those 2 incidents came before Charlottesville, but the pace has picked up. And not just Confederate figures such as Robert E. Lee at a chapel at Duke University, and also at another place in Duke's town of Durham, North Carolina. CNN has been keeping track of all the places in the country plan to remove or having recently removed Confederate statues. Others want a West Virginia statue of General Stonewall Jackson to come down. And plenty of people are talking about eliminating Georgia's famed sculptures at Stone Mountain. Of the non-Confederate figures attacked, consider that in Englewood, a large neighborhood in Chicago, vandals twice have defaced a statue of Abraham Lincoln, and a local alderman wants it removed to the library. In one of the incidents, somebody spray painted the nearby words F Law. Pepperdine University is removing a statue of explorer Christopher Columbus. And just today we heard the awful news that a 225-year-old statue of Christopher Columbus in Baltimore was severely damaged, unconscionable. In National Review Online, Kyle Smith has noted prominent writers calling for removal of pieces honoring historian Samuel Eliot Morrison and statesman Henry Cabot Lodge. And back in New Orleans, Black Lives Matter activists have noisily demonstrated at the famous statue of Andrew Jackson, hero of the Battle of New Orleans in the War of 1812, and demanded that that too be torn down. It's part of an effort called Take 'em Down NOLA, that wants all statues, school names, and street names of anyone they consider to be racist to be eliminated from the Crescent City. In California, even a little-remembered Catholic priest has come under attack. And while no actual vandalism or worse has yet been reported involving anything honoring those America's founders who were also slave owners, of course, there have already been well-publicized calls for Thomas Jefferson and George Washington to no longer be honored. Even the most famous Jefferson honoring place of all, the Jefferson Memorial across from the National Mall in Washington, D.C., will now receive revisions that emphasize his slave-holding past. Whether it's also will note Jefferson's early agitation for elimination of slavery, including in his original draft of the Declaration of Independence, is not clear. And I would ask this council to stop and think. Probably the worst historic artifact in the world is in Germany, and there are quite a few of them, where millions of people were put to their death needlessly. And you would think that the Jewish people would have marched, demonstrated, and done everything in their power to make sure the Allies destroyed those awful concentration camps. But no, they decided to leave them there for a reason. That reason was they wanted future generations to know how terrible that was, in the hopes that it would never, never again be repeated. Our memorial certainly doesn't fall into that category. If you read the inscription, there's no stars and bars on it. It simply is an honor to the war dead who fought from the state of Virginia, many from the city of Portsmouth. There's no celebratory meaning behind it. There's no glorification that, the South will rise again, the Northern Army of Virginia will march again. It's simply to honor those who died doing what they thought was right and defending their state. You got to remember, in the 19th century, a state was most people's country. Our nation was still very young, and your state was a source of pride. It was your homeland. When you wanted to defend it against what they perceived as aggression. We simply cannot apply 21st century ideology to the 19th century in retrospect. Can't be done. The question begs to be answered, as I read here, what's next? What other generations is going to come along? We've seen other memorials. I understand the Vietnam Memorial was recently defaced as well. Is a future generation going to advocate its removal? You know, it's easy to react in a knee-jerk fashion with a horrendous event that happened in our state. But what are you doing? The moves that you're doing in a knee-jerk fashion are going to be gone forever. Are we going to expand that to our history books in our schools? Are we going to purge our books? We're doing the very same things that most of us thought were awful when we saw on the evening news that ISIS was destroying antiquities all across the Middle East. We thought it was awful. And here we are basically doing the same. History is full of things that all of us don't agree with, don't like, but you can't rewrite it. Mayor, your own school, VMI, and you're proud to be a former cadet who graduated. It's full of Confederate monuments. I would hope that you wouldn't call for their removal. I would hope that Mr. Lieutenant Governor Northam, who also graduated from VMI, wouldn't call for the same. But to put those standards on Portsmouth or some other locality, you can't say you're doing it for the good of be doing it. What you're doing is erasing history. And to answer your question, yes, I'm opposed to it.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes. Ladies and gentlemen, please restrain from showing any emotion. We've got a long night. We got 25 speakers. And it's the council rule that you do not clap or applaud, yell, be respectful. And if you can't be respectful, I'll ask the Sergeant of Arms to remove you from the room. So as we go forward, let's be respectful of each other and respect the speaker. The chair recognizes Councilman Clark.
I'm also in objection to this for multiple reasons, and I will go through my reasons at this time. The first reason, I have been under oath since the time I was age 18 till now to uphold the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia. First example I cite, which would be my first exhibit, is Code Section 15.2-1812, Memorials for War Veterans. And I won't read the entire code section, but the section I have highlighted here, it says, if such erected, it shall be unlawful for authorities of the locality or any other person or persons to disturb or interfere with any monuments or memorials so erected. Then it says, for the purpose of this section, disturb or interfere with includes removal of, damaging or defacing monuments or memorials. That's my first one. Second, I'm referring to Section 2.0 as part of our city charter, which the city charter is granted under the 15 code section of Virginia. The section under city charter, it says the city shall also have the power to take other official actions not in conflict with the Constitution of Virginia or other laws of Virginia. So that's why I'm talking about the charter, because we're not allowed to go in opposition of state code. The first I read you was the state code. Next example I will give you, which pertains to all of us sitting up here at this time. I will read mine for example. This is the oath that I took last December to sit on this council. It says, I, Nathan J. Clark, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as city councilman of the city of Portsmouth according to the best of my ability, so help me God. Key point, that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Commonwealth of Virginia. That refers back to the two code sections I have just read to you. And if that's not enough evidence that we shouldn't be doing this because it is in violation of law, I also have another document in front of me. This is a document, this is a deed that is registered in the city of Portsmouth Courthouse that's verifying that that monument and the property it's sitting on is private property. If that is private property, we do not have the authority to move that. That would be like us saying that your house on your property, we were going to come there and move your house a quarter mile down the road. That is not appropriate, and neither is this. This is on file, like I said, in the clerk's office. This deed was made in, I believe, 1929. In addition to that, it is a general warranty deed. And definition of that, if people would like to know, a general warranty deed is a legal document that identifies the owner of a property and also guarantees that the owner of that property is free and clear of any encumbrances or claims against it, makes this guarantee for as far back as the original defining of this property. So with all that said, it is my opinion that any affirmation of a motion to move this monument is a violation of state code, it's a violation of our city charter, and it's a violation of the oath of this office. By doing this, this will put the city at risk for criminal penalties and civil liabilities. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. And the chair recognizes Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just want to respond to the statement. We don't want misinformation going forward from the council. The direction that was given to the city manager was to bring back the necessary steps for removing the monument, not for destroying the monument. I think we're trying to engulf the minds of certain persons by bringing in these examples of where monuments have been destroyed and defaced. That's not what is happening in this situation. Also, I think that we have to be careful sitting on this council, assuming the positions of the city attorney. I think it's for the city attorney to give us legal opinions, not council. And so my statement stands as stated, that we direct the city manager as said.
Yes, the chair recognizes Vice Mayor Cherry.
Thank you, Mayor. In addition to what Dr. Whitaker asked, since we do have people up here spitting out law, can we have the city attorney come back at that time also with his legal opinion on the next steps to, as Dr. Whitaker said, remove, not destroy the monument?
Okay. If I may restate, what the question is, and it's not in the form of a motion, is to instruct the city manager and the city attorney to bring back a report on the procedure and steps necessary to move the Confederate Memorial at High and Court Street to Cedar Grove Cemetery. And so it's a process instructing them to start work. No decision is made with this motion or this question. Is that correct?
That's correct. And also that information will be brought back at the next public work session.
If it's ready?
Right.
Yeah.
The next public work session.
Okay, Chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Before the train gets too far down the track along those lines, I think I invite all my colleagues to read the definition of a deed. A deed can only apply to property, and that deed came from the courthouse. And I'm sure my colleague, Mr. Clark, will supply a copy of that deed. And that deed represents, I think, what a lot of people have been saying and talking about. This is not a new subject for quite a while. Now we've produced the document. That's not our property to be planning to do anything with it. So, as my colleague stated earlier, we're bound to uphold the law. And Councilman Whitaker, that's not practicing law. That's abiding by the oath that all of us took when we became members of this council.
Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Lucas Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to also concur with the request by Councilman Whitaker and also Vice Mayor Cherry to bring back further information from our council. I would like to also remind our citizens here and watching that our governor, Terry McAuliffe, called for all Virginia cities to follow suit to remove Confederate monuments. Breaking news just popped up on my device that Norfolk is also requesting the same. So if Governor Terry McAuliffe has asked that Virginia cities follow this suit, then I would like to do what the state requires for us to do in this method.
Thank you, ma'am. The chair recognizes Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, I just want to say, since we do have a lot of children, young people that watch our council meetings, I find it interesting that Mr. Moody is raising the Constitution because I believe the Constitution was ratified in, I think it was around 1787. And so it's interesting that you keep raising the Constitution, but the very group that you are honoring was in violation of the U.S. Constitution. Because at that time...
Ladies and gentlemen, please,
Because at
I'll
that
clear the
time,
chamber.
At Lakeview Elementary School, I was taught that it was the United States. And so therefore, this constitutional argument you keep raising, it actually flies in the face of what you're honoring. Because had those individuals upheld the law and the Constitution, we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
Thank you, sir.
And so thank you for bringing up the Constitution.
Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes Councilmember Moody.
Dr. Whitaker, not going to debate you. I don't recall raising the Constitution. I raised the question that that is private property. We've produced a deed, and I don't want you to get into more legal trouble.
Ladies and gentlemen,
and also
you would know.
And also, while I certainly respect the governor, I also know the governor is not a Virginian. He's from Syracuse, New York. So let him work on getting rid of any monuments that he deems not appropriate in the state of New York, not in Virginia, because I'm sure he'll be living elsewhere after his term is up. But we'll have to live with the carnage and the damage.
thank you, sir. Any other member of council want to speak? Okay. The chair will recognize people who have signed up to speak. We'll have order in this council chamber. And if you disrupt the order, I'll ask the Sergeant of Arms to escort you out. I concur with Dr. Whitaker's request that we ask the city manager and the city attorney to bring back a report on the procedure and the steps to move the Confederate Memorial from its present location to the historic Cedar Grove Cemetery. We have a majority of council that concurs, and so please proceed. Any other items? Which brings us report on pending items, item 17375. Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. In the absence of my colleague, Ms. Simmons, who's ill, hopefully she'll be back with us soon. But I have a listing here of upcoming events in Portsmouth. These are nice things we can have fun with. First one is our Sunset Thursdays at Portside. August the 24th, we have the Michael Clark Band playing. On the 31st of August, Heather Murphy Band playing. And that's a free concert from 6:30 to 9 p.m. at the Water Stage. We also have the Farmers Market every Saturday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. just outside the Portsmouth Art and Cultural Center courtyard at Court and High Street. Matter of fact, it's right next to that beautiful Confederate memorial. Resistance and Resilience memoir workshop of the Jim Crow era, Friday, August the 25th. That's from 10 to 11:30 a.m. That's at the Portsmouth Colored Community Library Museum. Participation is free. And that's another example of an era that we don't want to go back to, but that's a reminder of exactly that for future generations. We don't want to ever revisit that. We also have the 47th Annual Seawall Art Show coming up on Saturday, August the 26th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Sunday and Sunday. August the 27th, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Admission is free, live music. Downtown restaurants will be open, be concessionaires, and be some beautiful artwork. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. All right, this brings us to non-agended speakers, and I'm going to ask the clerk to reread the protocol on speakers, please.
City Council rules require a limit of up to 5 minutes to speak. As you approach the speaker's podium, you will see a timer. At the beginning of your 5 minutes, you will see a green light. 4 minutes into your remarks, you will see a yellow light. And at 5 minutes, you will see a red light, hear a beep, and we ask that you conclude your remarks at that time. While speakers have an opportunity to address council on matters of public concern, all comments should be made in a manner that respects the seriousness of the forum and should not be made in a belligerent, sarcastic, or demeaning fashion. A speaker who fails to observe this basic rule of decorum will be deemed out of order and not allowed to conclude his/her remarks.
Thank you, ma'am. Our first speaker is Mr. Bill Conley, and sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, City Council, staff. I am William J. Conley, and I live at 475 Water Street. If you look out the window, you can see my home from here. What I wish to speak to you tonight, I have attended over 200 of these council meetings in the last 20 years, and I am very concerned. I was very concerned about my civil rights and about the right to speak out. So I attended the meeting last night, and I was very pleased to hear that Councilman Whitaker included the First Amendment in his proposal, and he did a fine job. The discussion was very good, but I do have one fault with it. I sat directly behind our mayor, and he speaks so softly and so wonderfully, I never heard a word he said. And all the people sitting next to me, they never heard a word you said. So please, if you may, speak up a little bit. I consider the non-agenda speakers part of the First Amendment rights of all the citizens. Not all the citizens will come bearing roses, Mum's soup to make you feel well. Some will come angry and some will come very frustrated. But they, too, as long as they're not abusive and they don't use bad language, they have a right to be heard. 2 weeks ago, we had a discussion with one of the speakers and Dr. Patton, and I want to say that I didn't think that the mayor should have been cautioned on what he was allowed to do. I didn't find it her offensive. She had a right to speak what she said, and if anyone can defend themselves, believe me, the manager can speak very well for herself. Okay, I would like to tell you about the non-agenda speakers, with why I like it so much. I would never know who Joe Wright is, Reggie, Allen, Mrs. Sade, Dolores Knights, Steve, and Mark. I never can speak his last name, so God bless him. But anyways, I wouldn't know these gentlemen. I never worked here. I moved here 20 years ago as a retired person, and yet I know these men personally, and when I listen to the non-agenda speakers, oftentimes I drive and go see what they're talking about, because it makes me a better citizen. And when I walk into the booth to place my vote, I know how each and every one of you have voted on or spoke on that. Makes me a better citizen. I wish, as Mayor Rowe has spoken many times, we need to upgrade our democracy and more people come involved. Okay, as a footnote, I read this in the paper. Mayor John Rowe said in the paper, if legal, we are ready to move the memorial. And tonight's discussion points that out very well. But I'd like to say this to you. If it was put there by private funds, those of you who want to move the memorial, get up the funds to pay for it. I don't feel the city should pay for it. If the citizens of this city want to move the memorial, let them get up the funds. And if John Rowe and the rest of you say it's time to move it. Okay, I'd like to go one more item. The other item I signed up to speak about was last week at 1705, a place that's 27 units on the old Kearns building. And Mr. Moody spoke up, Councilman Moody spoke up, said, thank you very much, but you didn't mention where those 27 people are gonna park. You said, well, they'll park down the city garage. Let me tell you, when it's raining and somebody's bringing groceries home, if he sees a parking space, he's gonna take it. My wife and I, we participate in downtown. We go to the restaurants, we go to the movies. Often I drop her off because she's handicapped. We can't find a parking space. Drop her off at the theater, and then I'll walk 2-3 blocks sometimes to find a parking space, okay? Now, these 27 units are gonna take up parking spaces downtown. I don't know, the city's caught between a rock and a hard spot. You know, you wanna put people downtown, you wanna have the businesses flourish, I understand that. Good luck on it, because those people will not, if they find a parking space, they will take it. Okay, I wish to add one more thing. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. I don't like to, of the 200 times I've been here, I spoke exactly 4 times in the 20 years I've been here. So excuse me for being nervous, but.
Sir, your time is up.
Pardon me?
Your time is up.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and all you do for the city.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Rosemary Ringer, and ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Rosemary Thornton, Ringer, I guess. I'm the author of 9 books, a historian, and my area of expertise is architectural history. My books and I have appeared on PBS's History Detectives, A&E's Biography, CBS Sunday Morning News, NPR, BBC Radio, blah, blah, blah. Pretty cool, huh? In the last 3 months, I've been interviewed by the Boston Globe, USA Today, the Washington Post, so I do know a little something about architectural history. I'm a native of Portsmouth, and I currently live in Churchland, and I'm here to ask you to please leave the Confederate monument where it is and to leave it undisturbed. 2 years ago, I addressed City Council from this podium and told you that when I was a little girl, my father would take me to downtown Portsmouth to give me some insight about the history of the city. And he'd always pause at the Confederate monument and tell me the story of the Civil War and how that the sacrifices of the young men who collapsed on the battlefield and died, and their bodies were left there where they laid. And that really is what started my interest in history in general. The cost to uproot and relocate this monument is probably going to be several $100,000, if not closer to $1 million. And the odds of it being damaged or even destroyed are great during such a move. If it can be successfully moved, the cost is going to be exorbitant. There's going to be studies, consulting fees, surveys, expert opinions, and so forth. I really question if the city of Portsmouth has the resources with all the ongoing financial issues to put $500,000 or $1 million toward moving a monument that sat there since the 1890s. And there's this. The monument was erected in the early 1890s, about 30 years after the war ended. The funds for its construction actually came primarily from the widows of the men who fell in battle. In the Victorian era, it was well understood that a proper period of mourning was essential if a woman was expected to regain some semblance of sanity and peace. Funeral rituals were very elaborate and complex, all designed to comfort the grieving widow, assuage the agony, and promote healing. Even then, it was recognized that in the case of a traumatic or tragic death, the mourning period might continue on for years and even decades. The monument in downtown Portsmouth really is there to serve as a grave marker for the men and a place for the widows to mourn. In many cases in the Civil War, in most cases, the bodies of the soldiers were left to rot on the battlefield, and the women didn't even have a proper burial for their husbands. These widows wanted a place where they could come to honor their husbands, lay wreaths, and participate in the mourning rituals that were so common in this time. To move this monument today really is not very different from walking into a cemetery and knocking over tombstones. It is inappropriate. As a woman who's recently widowed, and I lost my husband in a very traumatic way, I feel I have a unique understanding and appreciation for the importance of memorials and rituals to promote healing. I'm no longer a little girl walking around Portsmouth holding my father's hand, but even today I still stroll by this monument and think about those widows whose hearts were broken and their souls were shattered when they got word that their husbands were gone and they wouldn't even have an opportunity to give them a proper burial. I have so much admiration for the strength and resolve of these women to raise the funds, build a monument at High End Court so that they could know their sacrifices and their husbands' sacrifices would never be forgotten. As a historian, a widow, and somebody who truly loves Portsmouth, I implore you, leave this monument alone and leave it where it stands. And I ask that all in support of leaving the monument where it is, please rise. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Stephen Hogg. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
I would like to dedicate this speech to the African American Confederate soldiers who made a sacrifice for such a worthy cause. I stand to protest the removal of the Confederate memorial. Not only does the monument not represent slavery and oppression, but I contend that it is the single greatest symbol of freedom we have in this city. The secession of the southern states was not beneficial to the institution of slavery. It virtually guaranteed the speedy abolition of slavery in the Western Territory, the District of Columbia, and the slave states that remained in the Union. It guaranteed the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the Dred Scott decision would be overturned in short order. But most importantly, it guaranteed the Fugitive Slave Act would no longer be enforced, allowing for a more effective Underground Railroad. Remember, the Confederate Constitution was no more pro-slavery than the United States Constitution. Staying in the Union was much more beneficial to slavery than leaving it. This is why abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison advocated the non-slave states should secede from the slave states in his newspaper, The Liberator. The Confederate states understood these political implications to slavery when they seceded. In contrast, the Northern Congress offered to pass the Corwin Amendment, which would have perpetuated slavery forever if the Confederate states returned to the Union. Lincoln endorsed this amendment as well as the Fugitive Slave Act in his inaugural address. The United States Senate on July 26, 1861, passed a resolution explicitly stating that they were not invading the South over the issue of slavery. On August 22, 1862, Abraham Lincoln wrote to newspaper editor Horace Greeley that, quote, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it," unquote. In August 1862, Frederick Douglass wrote in his newspaper, The North Star, that the Republican policy was, quote, "simply and solely to reconstruct the Union by which slavery shall retain all the power that it ever had," unquote. The so-called Emancipation Proclamation was passed to get black troops to fight for Lincoln. It said nothing about the immorality of slavery and was, quote, "a necessary war measure," unquote. It upheld the institution of slavery everywhere in the South that the Union controlled, including Portsmouth, Virginia, which is mentioned by name. Of the slaves that did flee to Union lines, they were placed in concentration camps. The Western Sanitary Commission informed Lincoln, quote, "It would seem now that one half are doomed to die in the process of freeing the rest," unquote. Virtually every country that abolished slavery in the Western Hemisphere in the 19th century did it peacefully. The idea that the war was fought over chattel slavery is a lie anachronistically created to justify the atrocities committed by the Union. So how was slavery abolished? While the United States Constitution still allowed slavery, a majority of the states abolished slavery through the doctrine of states' rights. The state of Virginia abolished slavery in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Minnesota through the Northwest Ordinance. Virginia native Thomas Jefferson signed the bill to abolish the Atlantic slave trade when he was president in 1808. Barn burner Democrats like David Wilmot and Preston King proposed legislation to prevent the expansion of slavery. The Free Soil Party helped the movement towards abolition under the leadership of the founder of the Democratic Party, Martin Van Buren, and former Democrat Senator John P. Hale. Of the minority of states that still had slavery in 1865, the 13th Amendment ended the institution. 10 of the 11 Confederate states were the key factor in getting the 3/4 requirement to ratify the amendment. In fact, more Union states rejected the 13th Amendment than Confederate states. So why did the Republican Party invade the Confederacy? Abolitionist Lysander Spooner said they started the war, quote, for maintaining and intensifying that political, commercial, and industrial slavery to which they have subjected the great body of people, both black and white, unquote. Despite this strong criticism, the Republican Party did manage to receive support from contemporary individuals like Karl Marx and, quote, the working men of Europe, unquote, as well as notable 20th century figures like Adolf Hitler, who praised Abraham Lincoln in his autobiography, Mein Kampf. In contrast, consider what contemporary liberal historian John Acton wrote concerning the Confederacy. Quote, I saw in states' rights the only availing check upon the absolutism of the sovereign will, and secession filled me with hope, not as the destruction, but as the redemption of democracy. I believe that the example of that great reform would have blessed all races of mankind by establishing true freedom, purged of the native dangers and disorders of republics, unquote. I oppose the removal of the Confederate memorial. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Mark Miller. And, sir, you have 5 minutes.
Mayor and city council members, I was out there on Thursday, and I opposed removing this monument. I was out there Thursday, and I opposed removing this monument. I'm a historian buff. I do programs for schools, and I want to give you, when Abraham Lincoln, when he gave those terms to Grant, to give to Lee, he wanted this union to come back together. African Americans, Union, and Confederate. Each state had their right to bury their dead the way they wanted and put up those memorials. If we tear them down, where do we stop? I was out there at that protest the other day, as you were, Mr. Mayor, and I had a gentleman come over to me, and I guess because I was dressed in blue, he thought he could tell me something, and this is what he told me. This is our first step. We're going to remove these monuments here in town squares, and then we're going to, if you move them to the cemeteries, we're going to take them out there later. And at that point, I told the gentleman I had no more conversation with him. But I feel like these monuments were put out there for the war dead, the war memorials. They're not in your face. They're not hate. These are families that lost their loved ones. They're loved ones that were lost on a battlefield where they never even found them. They were never sent home. They were monuments to their dying families. And I oppose this. I think people are trying to rewrite history. And also, what offends me when I was out there exercising my right as a citizen here in Portsmouth and was told by a person that came in here from Charlottesville that wasn't even a citizen of Virginia, let alone Portsmouth, tell a police officer to remove me from the monument as I'm standing out there with a sign saying, save all the monuments. And I think this is going to, what Lincoln wanted to do to bring this country back, you're going to open up a lot of wounds. I think there's other ways we can go about doing this without causing all this hate, discord, and I'm just frustrated because a lot of you members up there, I voted for you in the last election, and you also, Mayor, and this really just bothers me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Moody, did you want the floor?
Actually, a couple of speakers ago, Ms. Thornton, she had mentioned who raised the money. I was going to just add that it was erected by the Ladies Memorial Aid Association of Portsmouth, Virginia. So our memorial to the Confederate dead wasn't raised by some out-of-town group, out-of-state group. It was raised by people right here in Portsmouth. And I'm certain we still have a lot of people kin to them. And in 1997, it was also listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And I want to remind my colleagues, they have a process. I've got it here, but I'm not going to read it in deference to the lateness of the evening, but there is a process involved. You just don't decide one day you're going to yank a historic property on the National Registry away and do something with it. There's a procedure involved, pretty complicated. They want assurances, if indeed it could be moved, that it's going to be handled properly. But since we have a deed, that probably won't come to fruition anyway. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Would you share that with the city manager, please?
Yes.
Next speaker is Joseph McClure. And, sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor, city member, or council members, and fellow engaged citizens of Portsmouth. I am Joseph McClure, and I stand here as a father, a retired veteran, a Native American, and a citizen in distress. I present art as a solution to relieve this stress. Let me share a quote. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. These words hold true today as it did 54 years ago when Martin Luther King Jr. wrote them in that Birmingham jail. This shallow understanding comes from the belief of what caused our Civil War. The belief that slavery was the sole cause is not true. The cause of the war is as old as the inception of the United States of America, a battle that started amongst the founding fathers. It is the fight for states' rights versus the federal government, and this battle still goes on today. This is evident in the recent calls for certain states to now secede from the Union. However, that's a discussion for a different time, as our hearts and thoughts go out to the victims of the tragedy that occurred in Charlottesville. I implore you to use your intellectual and not only emotional reasoning when developing a solution on what to do with the Confederate memorial within our city. I offer a solution of reinventing and rededicating, not removal of the memorial. Let Portsmouth lead the charge in this paradigm shift and show the state as well as the nation that there's a different solution that can serve the best interest of the community. There are two overshadowing fears that I have if we keep perpetuating the idea of removal and not that of reinventing and rededication. The first fear being, where would it end? If we remove because it offends someone, then we stand for the removal of almost everything that's been built. We must understand that right now our memorial is there for the common soldier, not for the elite of the Confederacy. They were individuals that were forced to take up arms by political leaders who only had selfish intent. A modern comparison would be that of the individuals called to arms to fight in the Vietnam conflict. Who's to stop a person of Vietnamese descent to be offended by the Vietnam Wall, having a constant reminder of the atrocities that occurred there, and demanding its removal, or the removal of churches and mosques throughout the city because of the centuries of slaughter they have inflicted on all of humanity in the name of religion? Will it end ultimately in the removal of the American flag because of the representation of genocide for my people? The second fear is that giving this extremists a platform in which to build a stronger foundation for their message of hate. It could be interpreted as a cultural cleansing of their history, thereby giving them a boisterous voice to dissuade people from the true intent of humanity. In closing, I ask the city to consider commissioning a contest that would solicit ideas to make additions to the current memorial by incorporating all parties involved in our Civil War and doing a rededication as a Civil War memorial and not just a Confederate memorial. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the next speaker is Steve Carroll. And, sir, you have 5 minutes.
Evening, Mayor, members of council. I'll get right to the point. What would you say if I suggested that we fly this flag over City Hall tomorrow? It's repulsive, isn't it? Anybody disagree? Why would you object to it? This is not the Nazi flag. This 1924 to 1939, this happened to be the insignia of the 45th Infantry Division of the United States Army. How easily charlatans can take the truth and manipulate it, just as I did you. Charlatans who pander to race baiting to make a point. A lot of hypocrisy about the Confederate flag and that monument. They rail about how the Confederacy was to blame for 750,000 deaths. Yet there are several members on this dais tonight who support politicians who support the murder of innocent babies yearly. Over 30 million of them since Roe versus Wade was invoked. What bloodthirsty hypocrisy. And I could name you by name. And some of you do it from God's pulpit. That's the disgusting part. As for Governor McAuliffe, indeed, he is from New York. He's literally a carpetbagger. He came to this state for one reason and one reason only, to garner political support for his political cronies. He has no roots in Virginia. He understands nothing of Virginia history, nothing of Virginia values and traditions. Lately, we just had some trollop in Missouri call for the assassination of the President of the United States. Is that not treason? Governor McAuliffe counts as a close personal friend, Bill and Hillary Clinton, who he loaned the money to so they could buy a home to move to New York so she could quickly run for the New York Senate. The same Bill and Hillary Clinton who are probably the most notorious congenital liars to ever sully the White House. And these are the people who want to remove our monuments, who claim moral superiority over us, Virginians. I have a picture at home of one of my relatives in his Confederate uniform who fought in the war. I dare say he doesn't look like he's barely 16 years old. What 16-year-old would march into cannon and musket fire to die for somebody else's slaves? That is stupidity to think that and believe it. What mother or father would send their 16-year-old to die for somebody else's slaves? Slavery is an evil. I can't think of, I just can't imagine it. I would never support it, never have. Joe, Clyde Toller, and a couple other people in here, if they called me tonight, I'd be at your house in a heartbeat to give you a hand. In a second. I'm not a racist, but there are people on this dais that are. And it's disgusting. It is hypocritical. Let me read a book from you here. This is from Ben Sass. He's a senator from Nebraska. I'm going to leave one paragraph of a magnificent book with so much insight. And on the social level, we can all agree that polarization is a problem. To put it simply, if every side becomes determined to protect itself from offensive and troubling ideas, we are going to be a country of increasingly walled-off groups, and that never ends well.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Sergio Neal. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, citizens of Portsmouth, Portsmouth City Council, Mayor Rowe, and everybody here from members of media. My name is Sergio Neal. Normally, I'm here representing multitude of groups that I work with. Tonight, I'm here as a taxpaying citizen of Portsmouth. I want to make sure that's on record. First and foremost, let me say this. As an African-American citizen of Portsmouth, I don't care if you move the monument. I don't care if it stays there. We have people that in our city that are living in mold and mildew and filth that PRHA is doing nothing about. So before you take any $100,000 or whatever the case might be to move that monument, go and fix their mold first. Because I can tell you right now, those kids that are breathing in that mold, they're gonna have the health problems. Who's gonna be there to take care of them? If we are cutting Medicaid, if we're trying to cut Medicaid and things like that, how are these kids gonna get health care with infections in the result of mold and mildew and that kind of stuff? So let's be clear on our priorities. Don't sell me a dream on black and white and who is this and who is that, because guess what? When you're playing with kids, it doesn't matter. Those kids don't see black and white. They see who's gonna help me. Who's gonna help me succeed in life, not who is black and who is white or whatever the case might be. That's first and foremost. So let's get our priorities in order. We have a lot of people that go and run for city office, sell people dreams to get votes, but when they get in office, the dynamic is totally different. Let me tell you something. I see right through the smoke and mirrors game, and that's for whoever's playing it. That's first and foremost. I can tell you right now, every time I go and pay my taxes, I want to see the city operating in the best interest of all people. Of all people, not this political group who voted for you, not that political group for who voted for you. I don't care who it is, as long as it's in the interest of all people. If you believe in Jesus Christ died for all people. Amen. Not for this group, not for that group, not the group up there or the group down there. Everybody. Some of you all that are on city council are pastors. If you preach the Bible, preach it all the way, not just to fit your dynamic. That's first and foremost. Let's stop playing games with people. Let's tell it for what it is. The second thing is this education thing, the funding of the school system. Let's be very clear. Education is important. If you don't know anything about me, I am a parent advocate for the school system to the day I die. And I'm going to keep being that. My son is in public school. I have the opportunity to put him in private school for 75% off the tuition. Because I work for a private school, I choose not to because of the simple fact that I want him to grow up in the same public education system that I grew up in. However, we can't play games when it comes to public education. If you have a vendetta against somebody that's on a different side, you need to go address that with them, not play games with the funding of the school system. Because guess what? Those kids, at the end of the day, have to suffer. When you have teachers that are making Facebook posts to go panhandle because they don't know if they're going to get paid, that's a problem for me. Because guess what? If your job was playing with your money like that, how many of you will be up there raising you know what to get your money? We can't play those type of games. It doesn't matter who it is, where it comes from. It shouldn't take a call to Vice Mayor Cherry if that's what really happened to get that check written to the school system, if it was already appropriated to them. Let's be very clear. We're not going to play these games because I can almost guarantee that's probably not what happened. But we can save that for another conversation. If you're going to tell the story, tell it right. Dr. Patton, let me say this to you, man, because I've been knowing you for a long time, and I have you in the highest regard. Whatever it is that is interfering with doing your job, or whoever it is, let them know that you are not put in your position to be playing games with. Be the same Dr. Patton that I've been knowing ever since I was probably 7 years old when you ran Parks and Recreation. Do not let these people play these mind games with you, ma'am, because I have you in the highest regard, and I'm quite sure plenty of other people do. That's first and foremost. So whatever it is, be fair to all the people, not just some of the people. Because I can guarantee right now, some of those same people that are trying to get to you to play those games with you are going to be the same people when you tell them no, they dog you all over social media, they dog you all over Channel 13, Wavy TV10, WVEC, WHRO, and CNN, ABC, and all the other channels. Let's get that very clear. Y'all have to stop selling yourselves short to some of these people that have their own political agenda. Because I can guarantee you right now, the minute you tell them no, they're going to be doing the same thing they did to anybody else. And I can guarantee that. Let's get it very clear. Do the job that you were elected or appointed to do it for all the people, not just for this group over here and that group over there. We have to stop playing these games.
Sir,
Thank
your
you
time
so
is.
much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I do ask respect for the rules and to our speakers. The next speaker is Clyde Toller. Sir, you got 5 minutes.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Member of Council, City Manager, Sergeant Arms, each and every one. Clyde Toller, our view. I would like to say, who are we? Now, I've heard a lot of mess about this statue. I'm a World War II career Vietnam veteran. I know what this sign, the swastika sign, mean. I saw it as an 18-year-old kid when I went to Germany. So when somebody waved that flag, that's a swastika flag, if they really knew what I saw, they would never raise a flag like that or wave it at nobody. So let's stop that. Anyway, who are we? I've heard that this monument is private property. That is true. That private property, I bet you nobody in Virginia has a deed to that. That statue is not on private property. That statue belongs to, who do I show you right there? Native America. Do they have a deed to say they bought it from us? No, they stole it. So I can go out there and say, show me your deed where you bought this from my tribe, my people. It was tried right here in Portsmouth, around Portsmouth. Now you show me where you bought it. I could say, look, take you to court and say, look, take this statue off my property, because it's not yours. You don't have a deed to it. And you can't show one. Now all you people that sit back and call people and say little nasty things and all this to them over the phone, look, you ain't man enough, you ain't woman enough to man up, but you can get on the phone and call somebody and say nasty things. Look, they call you Mayor Rowe and say, well, I voted for you, you ought to do this. So tell them next time, don't vote for me, or vote for somebody else. Because see, you don't have to take that kind of abuse. But I said this before a long time ago. Paint 2 of them faces black. And if you don't want to do that, take the heads off and put a black figure. Now that was 6,000 peoples of color that fought right along with the South. They were Confederate. Now I was looking on the phone. I saw where Confederate soldier 2, one was black, one was white. Look on your phone. You can look it up. You'll see it. So okay, now to solve this problem, this city wanted to be the leader of everything. Put a bench out there. Put a black soldier Confederate there and put the white one next to him, and let's move on. Everybody go by there who want to see it, take pictures. I've been here since '52. I never seen nobody there taking pictures of that statue until here lately. All this came up. But Mayor Rowe, you are the mayor for everybody in this city. Not for me, not for everybody, but the mayor for everybody. The decision that you and this council make are great. But when you sit up and say who it belongs to my people. And I can say you can move it. And I think if I went to federal court, I think I would win. Don't you think so? You can't show me a deed for it. But anyway, let's be the one to step up and show other cities, we are not Charlottesville, we are Portsmouth. Let's be Portsmouth people, and let's stop all of this mess we got going against one another. Don't move it, move it. Put the bench out there like I'm telling you, and everybody gonna be happy. Now here's how you do it. People of Portsmouth, come together. Take up a collection and do it just like back in the day. The people took it up because the people of color didn't have jobs, didn't have the money. That's why they won't in on that statue. But now you can be in on it. Take up the money, put a bench out there in front of it. Then if you want to go way back, we'll go back and say, hey, I can tell you the tribe. If you want to see every tribe that was in America, you can get it from me.
and I'll let you see, but you'll give me back my map, though. But look, let's stop all the criticism that we got, and let's be a city to step up and be the first to put it out there, and let's stop everything, and we'll all be a happy family. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And the next speaker is Laura Metzer. Laurie Metzger. All right. The next speaker then is Dolores Knight. And ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Rowe, Vice Mayor Cherry, Dr. Patton, City Attorney Ashby, Council, and our citizens of Portsmouth. My name is Dolores Knight, and I think everybody should say that name also when they come up here so we can hear. I have not spoken in quite a while, but the press conference kind of upset me the other day when TV had John Rowe and had really said, and I do really mean shocked me, really shocked me. Some time ago, the lengthy discussion came up in work session that was mentioned, but they're not going to remove the monument. So like I said, I was totally shocked. And changing your mind, I think, really surprised me, because you've been so faithful, just doing everything as you say and as you promise. I just couldn't believe they were saying it in front of the TV, like they were saying the monument court and how would be moved. They must move it. And we're going to place it at Cedar Grove Cemetery. The moving costs would be at least $112,000 stated in Virginia Pilot in 2 separate articles. Well, I think most of Portsmouth citizens know that's a guesstimate. It wouldn't be $112,000, much more. Right or, but I think it, of course it's going to be more. So the amount from the sky, maybe you could just pull it and say 112. Got to start somewhere. And Council Whitaker was mentioned twice, was quoted twice in the newspaper. Yes, 2 times, 2 different times. August the 16th, 2017, as saying that he would contribute his council salary, $23,000, to move it. And the second newspaper article was dated August the 18th, which read, Whitaker has long pushed for the monument's removal, called a simple symbol of racism. He has even offered to contribute his salary of $23,000 from the council. So let's move it, huh? Don't forget, it's a great idea, but it's really, really wrong. That's the way I feel. And it's not bothering anybody. All of a sudden, somebody wants to move a monument, move one, then move more. Every state wants to do something now to follow the main one. Just keep your promise, Mayor Rowe. It said it will be removed by the end of the year. But I really have been thinking, the ones that want to get this job accomplished should pool their council payment together and consider a done deal. Then maybe the ones then will be happy. But the other ones, I have another thought. That's, of course, I would think this way. I have a great idea. Spend some of the money somewhere else. Maybe the citizens of Craddock, do you know the name Craddock? Do you know where it is? It's still in the same place. We could get 45 Afton Community Building fixed for more, a whole lot less than $123,000. So I just don't understand why, if the monument is going to cost that, and we know that the 45 After Community Center, that's where we used to vote when I moved to Portsmouth, in the Craddock area. Why can't we have that fixed and just do what you have to do for us? Because we haven't moved. We're still in Portsmouth. We're still in Craddock. Only thing different is our zip code. And the other thing is, I just think it's wrong to move the monument because it really wasn't discussed since at one time was not going to be moved. Now everything changed. Somebody really thinks they got some superpowers around here. Anyway, that's just my thought for tonight. I'm going to say what I had on my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker is Danielle B. Lindstein.
That's not bad.
Okay. And I apologize if I mispronounced the name.
Bielenstein. Bielenstein.
You have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Evening to the council and also to Mayor Rowe. My sister and I both were born in Maryview Hospital. I left to serve in the U.S. government for 34 years. Having to retire because of serious illness, I've come home to Portsmouth to spend the rest of my days here. I love Portsmouth deeply, regardless of its woes that rend the city. Training as a scientist, I've never understood racism. The laws of biology dictate that we are all the same with only small superficial differences. This would mean that nurture and culture is what tears us apart, but only if we let it. The Portsmouth Confederate Monument is also an obelisk, a sacred symbol honoring the dead since ancient Egypt. Everyone knows when the monument was built, beginning in 1876, in Portsmouth Old Town Square, a place of honor, in what was then the center of our town. Each corner had a purpose: a market, a jail, a church, and a courthouse. The obelisk was not erected during the Jim Crow era, nor during the 1950s-60s white anger response. Instead, it was built soon after the Civil War by the Ladies Memorial Aid Association of Portsmouth, Virginia, wherein its sole purpose was to build it. Widows and families raised funds through picnics, fairs, and contests so as to build this monument to honor their sons, husbands, uncles, and nephews. This is a very important point. The obelisk was built for loss, not reverence for a bloody war that took their men and boys. And remember, the Civil War was the last war where troops were often made up of those same men and boys from a particular place. If a battle decimated a troop, it meant that the women from that place suffered devastating losses. Another point on why this matters is that these women did this at a time when they had no financial independence nor political voice. How often in history do we hear of public statuary erected by women? Now do we dismiss their sacrifice? Another difference with our obelisk are the 4 men, each representing the 4 branches of the military. Historically, they are of significance, but only as representational figures. Local men were chosen to pose. And our monument is one of only 3 in America that depicts a sailor. If the purpose of this monument was to honor a real historical Confederate figure, I would have no hesitation in supporting the removal of it. But that isn't the case here. So where does this leave us? Now, looking at this objectively, I propose, and I want us all to come together, take some time, and see if we can come to some sort of answer together as a group. For example, I love the idea of the bench. We can put remove to our Confederate and just say to our dead and fix that and then leave the memorial as is, which is my preference. Remove the 4 men to a museum where they can be seen and studied locally. Remove the contents within the monument and send to the same museum. remove the word Confederate and replace it with the word military, the monument then would honor all of our dead that we've lost in war, and by doing so, we still abide by the Ladies' Memorial Aid. Rededicate the monument to honor all of our military dead. In place of the soldiers, have some stone urns or emblems to represent and honor the sacrifice that our men do in war, the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. On another note, the architect of the obelisk was Charles Cassell, a native of Portsmouth. He also built my house and St. John's, and we're only two remaining homeowners there. We hate war and we hate racism. We live in an age where we're literally tearing each other apart. As we witnessed in our own state last week, could it be possible to instead to rededicate our lives to goodness towards each other and rededicate our passions to honor all those men and women who've lost their lives to further this purpose? Just down Crawford Parkway, we have a park dedicated to the weapons of war.
Ma'am, you're out of time.
Let us rededicate.
Thank you. Our next speaker, before we'll take a recess, is Donna Sy. You're up. Ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Donna Sy, and I live in the Woodbine Farms neighborhood. Principles of Liberty 22 reads, "A free people should be governed by law and not by the whims of men." Many people in today's society are not governed by law, as demonstrated by the attacks on our patriotic men from our American history. These people are governed by their whims, not by their patriotism. For example, if these people were patriots, they would know that a change came at the close of the War of Southern Independence in remembering their war heroes. In the North, state governments and the Grand Army of the Republic began to raise monuments to its heroes in town squares and on battlefields, while in the South, including Portsmouth, monuments rose more slowly in a defeated land of demoralized heroes of a lost cause. Patriots would realize this, not unpatriotic people like we are seeing today. Unlike the North, Southern monuments were usually raised by public subscriptions and by efforts of the Ladies' Memorial Aid Association. At the war's end in 1865, Portsmouth was $300,000 in debt. It wasn't until May the 8th, 1875, that programs began for a monument when the Portsmouth and Norfolk County Monument Association was formed. The association was formed at the suggestion of F.W. Jett, who had served with General William Mahone's brigade. Jett was elected president of the Monument Association, and James Crocker, adjutant of the 9th Virginia Infantry. He had been wounded and captured during Pickett's charge at Gettysburg. The Monument Association chose Charles Castle, an ex-Confederate topographical engineer, to design the monument. On March the 9th, 1876, on the 14th anniversary of the Battle of Hampton Roads, a committee from the Monument Association approached the Portsmouth City Council with a petition requesting the council minutes on page 333, dated March the 10th, 1876. The petition was granted to the memory of the brave men from Portsmouth and Norfolk County who died in the Confederate service during the late war. The committee also recommended the adoption of the petition by the state. In October 1990, the Confederate monument was inducted into the National Register of Historic Places with the U.S. Department of Internal National Park Service with OMB number 100240018. On December the 14th, 1876, the cornerstone was laid with Masonic ceremonies. Placed within the cornerstone was a bunch of stuff. And on December the 15th, 1887, the infantry, south elevation, and artillery, north elevation statues were received and placed on platforms. The remaining statues, Navy, east elevation, and cavalry, west elevation, were placed subsequent to the dedication of the monument. The monument was finished on June the 15th, 1893, after almost 18 years. During the war, Portsmouth gave 1,242 men to the Confederacy, and 199 were killed or died. Norfolk County gave 1,018 to the cause, of whom 280 were killed or died. And the city of Norfolk gave 1,119, of whom 106 were killed or died. Shortly after the war, Portsmouth and Norfolk County patriotic residents desired to erect a monument to her Confederate dead. Patriots of Portsmouth at that time were from 3 districts created in 1752, 1763, and 1784. The monument was finished in June 15, 1893. The people in these annexes were not patriots of this movement. 1894, 1919, 2 and 1948, 1960, and 1968. They had nothing to do with honoring of the Confederate war dead and still don't. Their whim is to discount the sacrifices of our heroes that stood up for states' rights, our individual liberty, and the law of Virginia. The law says no one can disturb or interfere with any monument erected or prevent any citizen from taking all proper measures and exercising all proper means for the protection, preservation, and care of a Confederate monument. Thanks for listening. Donna B. Sy.
Thank you,
Virginia
ma'am.
Patriot.
Thank you, ma'am. We will take a short recess and reconvene at 9:15. We're in recess. And please be orderly, please. Give you a couple of seconds to find your seats. We're back in session. I'll call the meeting back to order. The next speaker is Cliff Page, and sir, you have 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I want to thank this country for the opportunity to have a democratic voice before an elected body. And I want to thank the people. I want to thank the people for you coming out here and expressing your democratic voice also.
Sir, would you address the city council? That's...
I was thanking the people, Mr. Mayor. Last night, though, a radical anarchist took over the city council meeting of Charlottesville. The council escaped through the back door. The Russian government in 1917 was taken over by only a handful of radical extremists of the communist and socialist parties who replaced it with left-wing tyranny of unequaled terror and unmerciful social destruction. Americans cannot allow this sacred democratic republic to be usurped by a mob of extremists bent on violence and anarchy, underwritten by outside left-wing tycoons with private agendas who want to sow discord and division, and organizations from the left and right who ply their wares on the backs of racism and racial fears to inflame emotions of the gullible. Nor can we tolerate spineless leaders who blow in the wind and bend like a reed to every boisterous group calling for revolution and radical change. Even when the voice of those groups is driven by loud-mouthed agendas of inconsequential public support whose arguments lack merit and are propped up by belligerent propagandists and seditious intentions. America needs to stand up to this kind of tyranny fast and grasp those usurpers by the scruff of their neck and throw them back in their playpens. The radical agendas and anarchy and extremists cannot be allowed to take over the democratic sanctuaries of sober decision-making and Republican governance. Our government cannot be ruled, intimidated, or impressed by mobs or exhibitions of violence. There can be no tolerance for mayhem, anarchy, and riot. The principal charter of every city in the Commonwealth is for the safety and protection of the people. And likewise, That is the broader responsibility of the governor and state legislature. Creating conditions of discord and unnecessarily stirring up sentiments of sedition and division and carnage in the streets is not protecting the people. It is a threat to the safety and well-being of the citizens. Where councils and state legislatures cannot show leadership that will protect our democracy, they should step aside and put some steel in their backbones. To complicate the cowardly removal of the monument or the monuments dedicated to the memory of those who gave their all for the public defense of the Old Dominion is an offense to the memory of its patriots and the principles of loyalty, honor, and bravery. There can be no compromise in this matter, for to do so would be an insult to all those who came before us who were willing to lay down their lives in defense of the Commonwealth and Portsmouth. Our monument to Portsmouth's Confederate dead and to those who served in the War of Secession was not only dedicated to that martial event, but also to those who served in our city's militias, who defended Virginia and the United States against the British in 1813.
Sir, your time is up. Our next speaker is Hugh Morrison. Hugo. I'm sorry, sir. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
So to members of council and the protocol that has already been established, it's Hugo Morrison. For the record, I just want to stand and say that the Confederacy was a bastion of white supremacy and slavery. At the center of this debate is what the Civil War was really all about. The people who defend these Confederate monuments frequently argue it was really about states' rights, while those on the other side argue the Civil War was about slavery. But the historical record makes it very clear that the Civil War was about slavery. And to the extent it was about states' rights at all, it was about the states' rights to maintain slavery. As noted in The Atlantic, South Carolina, the first state to secede from the Union, said in its official statement that it saw any attempt to abolish slavery and grant rights to Black Americans as hostile to the South and destructive of its beliefs and safety. In addition, in a letter encouraging Texas to succeed and join the Confederate States, Louisiana Commissioner George Williamson was even more explicit. He argued that the Confederacy was needed to preserve the blessings of African slavery and that the Confederate States are bound together by the same necessity and determination to preserve African slavery. Many other states made similar arguments, consequently and consistently pointing to slavery and white supremacy in these cases for successions. These statements leave no doubt that the South fought in the Civil War to protect the institutions of white supremacy and in particular slavery. In fact, Confederate symbolism, particularly the flag, only reemerged in U.S. culture as a backlash to the rise of civil rights movement. In addition, when researching and planning what has been coined as placemaking in municipalities, points of interest such as green spaces, public squares, and courtyards should be a place of unity and camaraderie. In light of recent events around the Commonwealth and beyond, these monuments have become a spot of contention, inciting violence, hatred, and division. Thus, they should be removed immediately. When monuments become the source of reenactment of white supremacy and oppression as an attempt to revive Southern ideals that were forced upon a nation, it becomes most urgent that we must remove them and place them in proper settings. These monuments have a place in 21st century museums, monument parks, and the like, where their monuments of leaders of unjust, failed, and vanquished states belong. The facts prove that these monuments are not symbols of Confederate heritage. Rather, it is of white supremacy. Almost none of them, with the exception of this one, were put up right after the Civil War. Some were erected during the Civil Rights era in the 1960s, which coincided with the war centennial, but the vast majority date between 1895 and World War I. The monuments were put up as explicit symbols of white supremacy. The Confederates won with the pen and the noose what they could not win on the battlefield. The cause of white supremacy and the dominant understanding of what the war was all about. We are still digging ourselves out from under the misinformation they spread, which has manifested in our public monuments and our history books. To use the rest of my time, we're arguing tonight and speaking about the Confederacy and the monument. However, our children, if they don't get the money that is necessary, they won't even learn this history lesson. So what are we going to do? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is James Mayo. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is James Mayo, and I'm kind of a Portsmouth native. I was born on down on Glasgow Street, lived there for 5 years. Had a little stint in the military, and I'm back in Portsmouth now. Everything I wanted to say has already been said. One thing, the gentleman preceding me, if he would look at all the recruiting posters for the North that have ever been printed, and there's some online, you will never find one that mentions slavery. The war did not start over slavery. It didn't become an issue until the Emancipation Proclamation. But it was an issue, but not the main cause. But I just wanted to tell you that about my experience with the Confederate Memorial. When I was a little kid, my mother and also the maid we had working would take me down in my stroller to the Confederate Memorial. And all through the time that I did that, they would tell me stories about my ancestors. I had one of them, John C. Owens. He lived right down there on Glasgow Street, and he was the commander of the Portsmouth Rifle Company when the war broke out. He was a carpenter, didn't own slaves. Nobody in the unit, as far as I can tell, owned slaves. They were all worked in the shipyard. They were shopkeepers, and whatever have you, some were unemployed. But when they left in 1862, they left families, kids, and a lot of them didn't ever come back. They did not leave to fight to perpetuate slavery. Portsmouth was more or less Union back then. It was a Union town. But they ended up, when Lincoln called for troops to invade Virginia, they followed Virginia when it seceded. Well, anyway, his kid was about 6 years old when he left. He would stand on the front porch, and this is coming from family lore, you know, passed down through the generations. And he would yell at the Yankees, "Don't you shoot my daddy." Well, they did. And they shot him at Gettysburg. He was leading the 9th Virginia. So he did not come back. Another one of my relatives was in the Portsmouth Light Artillery. He was killed at Antietam. He didn't come back. So after the war, things were tough for the people in Portsmouth, especially the widows whose husbands had been killed in the war. They had no social programs or anything to fall back on. And they got the money together to live, and what little they had, they put toward that monument. Might be interesting to note that the little boy he left behind, he eventually became the colonel of the 9th Virginia Militia during the Spanish-American War. But all through my life, you know, my early life, my family would tell me about John C. Owens, and when I look at that monument, I think of him. I think of him and Quentin Overman in the Portsmouth Light Artillery and all the rest of the guys that left here in '62 and didn't come back, or didn't come back till '65, and spent all that time thinking about their family living in an occupied city. And it was tough living in an occupied city too, because the occupation was tough. So I'm in favor of keeping the monument where it is. And I was there the other day for the display, the group down there at the monument. I was the other Yankee there. And we had a Black Lives Matter man that was there talking to us. And like Mr. Miller said before, he said that they were not going to leave the monuments alone if they were moved. They were going to keep going until they got them all. So moving the monument might sound good, but I don't think it's going to work. The answer is education. we also do school programs, and we stay out of the political realm for these things. And you'd be surprised at the interest from the kids in the Civil War. They just soak up information like a sponge. And I was talking to another friend of mine on the SOLs this year. There's one question out of 4 that says, what was the cause of the Civil War? If you answer anything but slavery, you get it wrong. We're not educating our children to history, and it's going to hurt us in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Mike Armstead. And, sir, you have 5 minutes.
All right, I just listened to a lot of facts and figures, and a lot of stuff's been thrown out here tonight. A lot of stuff is true, and a lot of points have been covered. And I don't want to resurrect all the things, but I want to address, I've got Portsmouth connection from my father. My 2 daughters live here. My granddaughter's grown up going to school here. I've got a Charlottesville connection. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, my mother from Charlottesville. And I hope everybody saw the news what happened up there last night. I'm a son of Confederate veteran, and I hate any white supremacist group using that flag. I hate any supremacy group of any kind. And what happened is a terrible thing that happened up there. But another thing that was mentioned here tonight is this Antifa group that came and took over Charlottesville last night also. Can't let that kind of thing happen. This Confederate monument stuff is just a foot in the door, all right? As it was brought up by Mr. Moody earlier, they're after George Washington, the Founding Fathers, Joan of Arc, for goodness sake, Christopher Columbus, anything, everything. I can bet you right now that when we started this meeting and we had a prayer, that those same people would not like you to say a prayer before this kind of thing. They would be against that. The Pledge of Allegiance we did before this, they would be against that. They're an anti-American group. I'd like to address a couple other things about this monument and the statue. The man that just spoke, and I didn't know exactly where I was going to go about this, but one thing that the gentleman did bring up was about the war being about slavery. All right, well, no, the war wasn't really about slavery. Yes, the first 7 states had slaves, and part of their succession documents talked about slavery. Virginia's, as a matter of fact, did not. But at that time, 7 states had seceded from the Union. That left 7 states that still had slavery. Mr. Lincoln was okay with those 7 states and asked for those 7 states to give him volunteers to go fight the other 7 states, besides all the other states. He did not worry about who had slaves and who did not. The man talked about the Emancipation Proclamation and what cities and states and parishes that it excluded, all right? The war was not fought over slavery. Some states succeeded that had slavery, and states stayed in the Union. At first, it did not. All right? Kentucky did not succeed. It had slaves. Maryland had slaves. Delaware had slaves. West Virginia was admitted with slaves. And this is after the last 4 left. All those states were allowed to stay in the Union with slaves until after the war was over and President Lincoln was actually dead. I look at we think that sometimes that the United States was the only country with slaves. When it comes to the Atlantic slave trade, as a matter of fact, Portugal was number 1 on that list. And most of the slaves went to Brazil. The United States and Britain were down number 5 out of 7. I'm not saying slavery was a good thing. I'm saying that this war was a different thing than just about slavery. I've only got 1 minute and 30 seconds here, but I'm going to tell you this. And I was shocked to hear about VMI and that you would think that the VMI cadets fought for slavery. But I tell you what, put yourself quickly in the shoes of a Confederate soldier, and he's Like mine was just an ancestor of mine. He was one of them was just a laborer in the railroad. He was a newlywed, had a 1-year-old child when he decided it was time for him to go to war. He probably could have got out because he worked for the railroad, but he didn't. The railroad was very much needed. And you think these men say, look, I've got to go and leave you, family, kiss your wife, your daughters, your sons goodbye, and go off to fight and die somewhere because Mr. James down the street has 100 slaves, and by golly, we're going to make sure he keeps them 100 slaves. I'm going to go off and run into some cannons, get blown to bits, and my friends will get blown to bits. I'm going to sleep on the ground. I'm going to wake up cold and frozen. I'm going to march with no shoes. I'm going to die of all kinds of diseases. My family will never find where I'm buried at. These memorials were erected. I walked through these grounds. I've seen where these guys have died. These memorials were not erected for slavery, and those guys did not go off and march and die and leave their families and never return home because Mr. James, a plantation owner, had 100 slaves and he had to keep his slaves. That doesn't even make sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to our next speaker, I want to remind everybody this is your opportunity to address council, and that's what the non-agenda speakers are. So please direct your comments to City Council. Our next speaker is Nelson Velez. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council. My name is Nelson Velez. This is my first appearance before this body since the November election. I want to take this time to congratulate the new members and commend them for the positive effect on improving the discourse and the tenor of these meetings and the good faith work during the past year. Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership improving the culture in these proceedings. There will be honest disagreements among people of goodwill. These conflicts may come to flesh out good solutions and work themselves to the betterment of all. These are, however, fundamental principles that if violated, creates a serious divide. It creates a serious historical crisis. Our history reflects great struggles between good and evil. It is how we resolve these struggles and the state of the world in which those struggles took place that make our nation exceptional. It is the good and the bad, the right and the wrong, and the resolution of these great conflicts that make our story a great one. Our national treasure is where our heart is. It is our principles of God-given freedoms and liberties that are our treasure. The monuments, statues, national landmarks reflect in timeless fashion those noble struggles of the past that make and that have made us the nation we are now and what we strive for in the days to come. The removal, the destruction, the defacing, or the relocation of any of these historic landmarks should be condemned for the intolerance it reflects to our national heritage and the threat to our First Amendment rights. We have never been a people that would rain ruin on our national landmarks. We should resist following the notion that if we declare that we are offended by a national monument, that we can just destroy or remove it. The terrorist group, the Taliban, stands in solidarity with those arrogant enough to destroy anything that they say offends. It is our story. We have always embraced it, warts and all, and it should be noted that without the great bad, there might not have ever been the great good that transpired. There have been many efforts to desecrate our monuments in our history. Many of these efforts were fortunately blocked by the courts. The court's finding is supposed to be based on the rule of law and not on mob rule. The rulings of these kinds of cases offer protection from efforts to harm our national landmarks, and these laws were instituted to protect such threats. Confederate soldiers, sailors, and Marines that fought in the Civil War were made U.S. veterans by an act of Congress in 1957, U.S. Public Law 85-425, Section 410. approved May 23, 1958. This made all Confederate Army, Navy, Marine veterans equal to U.S. war veterans. Additionally, under Public Law 810, approved by the 17th Congress on February 26, 1929, the War Department was directed to erect headstones and recognize Confederate grave sites as U.S. dead grave sites. When you remove a Confederate statue, monument, or headstone, you are in fact removing a statue, monument, or headstone of a U.S. veteran. These are not the people we are. We should not be going down this road. We have such serious matters to deal with. We're not exactly rich in Portsmouth. And these matters were not issues over the last decades. I don't remember any kind of conflict or any kind of arguments over this. But they have become serious problems over the last 8 years. When I lived in Cuba, I remember before I came here that there were stories about what the left-wing government of Fidel Castro did. One of the first things he did was target the monuments and the statues to separate his people from their past so that he can revise history. We are not those people. So I would like you to reconsider this effort. We will stand with any Americans who want to protect and preserve our national landmarks, through the courts if necessary. Hopefully that won't be necessary, and we can come up with a good solution that brings us all together. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Jack Bray. Jack Bray. And sir, you got 5 minutes.
I'm speaking to y'all. You bet you I am. My name is Jack Bray. I live in Port Norfolk. We bought some property in Port Norfolk in 2014, and my wife and I became disabled, had to leave the area because of getting in a wheelchair, had to be near my wife's work, came back here. I love Portsmouth. One thing I like about Portsmouth is something that a Virginia Pilot article did a while back, said that for every 578, maybe off a few people, there was one church in Portsmouth. Now, what does that tell you, folks? It tells you there are a lot of steeples around here. It tells you there are a lot of people that believe there is a God, okay? And that is a huge benefit for this city that we do not push, that we do not. I'm not saying we don't push it. We don't talk about it enough. So what does that say? I believe there's a lot of people that are praying that aren't here tonight, but they're praying that this city council will do the right thing. Now, what does that mean, do the right thing? Well, I think it comes, and I'm speaking to those that will disagree with me primarily, but those of you that agree with me, I hope you'll look at what I'm saying and think about it and pray about it. But what I'm saying to you is this. We need to do what? We need to take this situation in its context. What happened 150 years ago? What was going on? We need to look at it from a common sense standpoint. And we need to take the emotion out. We need to take the emotion out. We make better decisions when we do what? Don't buy the car, don't buy the house, don't marry that beautiful girl. You know, like Miss Lucas, she's very attractive. Now, I'm just saying, whoever it is, right? We get the emotion out, we calm down, we think about it. All right. I was born in New York. I have a mom from Long Island, New York. My dad was in Georgia. We have a farmhouse down there, 300 years old. We have a man there that's Confederate soldier on the property. Guess what? Since I was a kid, there are 3 houses built there, probably 1880, and there are families, African-American families in there, Mr. Whitaker. And guess what? They have never paid a dime. There's some of them, they're still living there, right in there today. All those years, white people allowing African-American people to live someplace free. Now, I'm just saying to you, we've come a long ways. Let's think about what happened then. Let's think about where we are as Americans now. Let me say, I hope you'll pray, and you'll pray about this decision, and I hope you'll think about the future. I hope you'll seek out people on all sides of the issue, Mr. Whitaker, Ms. Lucas, and all the rest of you, and be wiser people than you. I ask yourself, if the assumption was that slavery was an issue in the war between the North and the South, and I believe it was there, because economically their livelihood was dependent on slaves, that didn't mean they hated people, it was a part of their lifestyle. Was it not part of their economic stability? Was slavery wrong? Of course it was. Look where we are today, 150 years later. Look where we've come. We've got a long ways to go, of course. Can Americans, and more specifically the people of Portsmouth, Virginia, forgive? Mr. Whitaker, can we forgive? Ms. Lucas, can we forgive people all down the road here? Can you forgive these people for the mistake they made of slavery? They're dead. Can you forgive me because maybe I'm not right on the right issue? Can we move on? It's forgiveness, folks. This is what's important. Those who fought the war and lost their lives for a cause they thought was important to their families, to their livelihood. Ask yourself, do you or I, are we so perfect? Are we so perfect, Mr. Whitaker, Mr. Lucas, and the rest of us? Am I perfect, Jack? No. That we cannot forgive these soldiers that died 150 years for what they believed in? As I believe, as civil rights activists and past government officials recently said, Mr. Andrew Young, you might know him, right? He's down in Atlanta right now. You know what he said? Changing streets and names and taking down monuments ain't going to change this issue, folks. It's got to be from the heart. How about Gregory? Dick Gregory just died, civil activist. How about Martin Luther King? These are all people I believe in. I was down in Atlanta. I have read their books, some of these books. These are people important in my life. How about Mayor Holly? I was on the Mayor's Commission of Aging when I first moved here. I think he made mistakes. He made mistakes, but you know what? He was a heck of a mayor. He could run this council with a caring, loving heart. Can we forgive Mayor Holly? Would it now seem like a good time for each person, regardless of his age, to take some time to research the war? Let people get there and take their kids that are down there, like they said at the monument. Go home, go to the library. That's what I've been doing. Look at all the education that's going on this week because of this issue. A lot of good stuff. But would not these monuments be a clear, visible view to the public, allow us Americans to then use them as a teaching tool? I don't think they should move. They're a teaching tool.
Your time is up, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen and
Thank
ladies.
you. Next, do you really want the floor? The chair recognizes Councilwoman Lucas Burke.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, you know I love all of you all. I do. And for the record, it is Lucas Burke. I am married. Lucas is my mom. Burke is my husband. I'm Lucas Burke. And when incidents happen like they happened in Charlotte, that reopens the wounds. You know, we want to forget. We want to put it all behind us. But when we have these kinds of things that occur, and they reopen the wounds, when we look in the Virginia palette and we see that where a monument is placed is where they used to whip slaves so that they can keep them in their place. That reopens the wounds. When we see those articles in Norfolk, when they say that was where slaves were sold and they have monuments there, that reopens the wound. So you feel your way, we feel our way. And then the next day, we'll go and we'll work on something else. So you have your opinion, I have my opinion. And I thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Next speaker is Jefferson Gent. And sir, you got 5 minutes.
Good evening, honorable members of the City Council and Mayor, Vice Mayor, and all the members of our community. I am Jefferson Herbert Gent. I am a longtime resident, a landowner and business owner in our richly historic Old Town neighborhood. My great-grandfather, William Veal Herbert Williams, is featured in the book History of Norfolk County, published in 1902. As a prominent representative citizen, he is credited with being the treasurer of the Confederate Monumental Association from 1880 until the Portsmouth Confederate Monument's completion shortly thereafter. He also served on the Portsmouth School Board and on this city council, among many other notable achievements in this community. Mr. Williams was well liked and respected in this community and was instrumental in reconstructing Portsmouth and helping it to thrive after 8 years of federal occupation after the Civil War. Our monument was erected at the specific location that it is standing today to commemorate the memory of the brave soldiers from Portsmouth and Norfolk County who were conscripted, many of those were conscripted to join by the state of Virginia, the government that existed at that time, much different than today, I might add. Our ancestors did not choose that war. It came like a great flood. When Portsmouth was lost in 1862, my great-grandparents and many other founding families of Portsmouth were kicked out of their homes for several years during federal occupation. All families suffered and survived, or some didn't. But we are a cumulative result of that past. All families suffered and survived that tumultuous time and rebuilt this great city and made peace with the African American community, and we as a whole grew together. Now those souls are at rest. I suggest council members and the community at large condemn all antagonists and those who would incite violence or seek to hijack history. Instead, take time to build an opportunity to study history more deeply and get to know each other through joint remembrance and commemoration before we allow them to make false claims of hatred about our loving memorials to our dead ancestors and founders of this town. The location was chosen unanimously by a committee of leading citizens of their time after the Civil War ended. The memorial was designed to pay tribute to fallen citizens of all of Greater Norfolk County, our ancestors. Each of us is the cumulative product of our past. We are all here together now. We are a nation at war. Many people forget that, but for 15 years plus we've been at war. Anyone who defaces historical monuments or chooses to tear apart the fabric of our individually unique yet collective history should be suspected of treasonous intent. Why do we allow people to do these things without response? Let us live by the laws that we collectively created and defend the diverse cultural history that makes us a tolerant society, but be wary of those who would divide and incite intolerance and speak of hateful things. Those who would call a Southerner or a Confederate soldier a traitor, or even worse, a terrorist, should not be considered beneficial leaders to our community. We must move past that now. Those who call my ancestors terrorists are effectively calling me a terrorist. I'm not a terrorist. They weren't terrorists. They lived at the time and the place that they lived and did what they thought was right at the time. That's all. The truth is, in 2016, House Bill 587 was passed by a vast majority of the Virginia House and Senate, yet Governor McAuliffe vetoed the bill that would have eliminated the possibility of anarchy and resulted instead in doubt about Virginia's commitment to the preservation of history. The consequence was that this opened the door for other carpetbaggers, as the governor has admitted. Now the right and left-wing extremists are hijacking and targeting the monuments and polarizing symbols of our past. There will be no new majority. We are all members of this community, yet we have the opportunity to be a model community and lead from the center while rejecting all forms of extremism, left and right. The many and diverse memorials and monuments of our ancestors should be respected and preserved for future generations to remember, to forever be testament to the horrors of war and the strength of character of strong leaders at the time and the place that they lived. As throughout world history, destruction of monuments to our founding fathers of these great United States of America is blasphemous. Instead, I propose, as others from this community have, that we build a monument hall or a monument avenue on Court Street and seek to provide a full and complete historical perspective and timeline that will serve to educate and unify our community and provide a wonderful tourist exhibit as well.
Sir, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Devontae Thomas. And ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Devinette Thomas. I go by Bonnie Thomas. Hello, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of council. I just wanted to come and say I really do. I want to thank you so much for deciding to finally move the monument. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I want to really thank Dr. Whitaker for all the work you've done, and you've brought that issue up so many times, and we've heard so many people come up here and express views counter to my point of view. And, you know, so many people talk about that monument representing history, but I always think that it's very interesting that people who say they're history buffs, and that is why they're interested in having such a monument. Well, if that's the case, why is it just the Civil War monuments that are put up? Where are the Rosa Parks monuments and the monuments and the artifacts and all of the things that represent other Virginia facts? Where are those things, and why aren't they on public display in our city? That's one thing I would like to mention. And also, you know, history is told from many different perspectives. When I see that monument and many people who look like me, for example, you know, Robert E. Lee, for example, to you, he may be a hero, but to me, he's a person who enslaved my people and people who look like me. I mean, during slavery times, women, pregnant women were hung and babies were cut from their bellies. That's what happened to people who were slaves who were living on the plantation of Robert E. Lee. And yet I hear people calling him a hero. And people think that he should have a monument up. And to me, that is just, you know, that's crazy. And I think about when you talk about history in our country and in our nation, what if some Muslim Americans think that the pilots who drove those planes into buildings in New York, what if they think they're heroes? And they think that some of the people in America, that somehow we deserve that, and there should be monuments put up here in the U.S. We would think they're crazy. But yet that's a part of history. So just because something is historic, it doesn't necessarily mean that we want monuments put up to celebrate it. And it doesn't mean that it's on the right side of history. And I think finally Portsmouth has an opportunity to do something and be on the right side of history. And we do have a moral obligation to move those monuments and to finally do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker is Larry Jones. And sir, you've got 5 minutes.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Larry Jones from the Pinewood section of Capitol Manor. First, I would like to thank Councilman Mark Whitaker for taking his stance against the ideology of what the Portsmouth Confederate Monument stands for, a symbol of hate and white supremacy. For several years, you have been the voice on City Council for the removal of the Confederate Monument. You, sir, are a champion of the cause. Just last week, Mayor John Rowe stated at a press conference that morally, moving the monument to a cemetery was the right thing to do. I agree. Thank you, sir. And thank you, Councilman Lucas Burke, for your words. Sure, let's tell our history, Councilman Moody. Let's tell both sides. The rights of who? African-American slaves weren't afforded any rights. I suggest reading the horrific stories of former slaves from Portsmouth at the Library of Virginia and others. My research is about Portsmouth slave whipping posts and its connection to the Confederate monument. After intensive research, I said to myself, good Lord, you mean to tell me we allowed a Confederate monument on a site where slaves were ripped, beaten, imprisoned, mutilated, branded, raped, and murdered? Pregnant slave women, no exception. I'm keep scratching my head. You mean to tell me we allowed a monument to be placed on a site where over 1,000 blacks screamed and prayed according to the diary of a Union soldier and the Virginia Historical Society from the hands of the whip to stop? Some didn't even make a sound. If a whipping was enough, the wounds of the backs of slaves were burst. Serpentine and red pepper were poured over the slaves' backs. Yet City Council of that era allowed a Confederate monument to be placed at the same location where slaves spilled their blood. In 1861, the whipping post was still standing during the Civil War until a Union soldier enlisted free slaves to help him steal and preserve it as a symbol of barbaric acts. If we want to honor the dead of the lost cause, why not in a cemetery or inside a Richmond museum like the Virginia Historical Society, where Portsmouth's famous whipping post currently sits, instead of trying to reassert white supremacy at the public square? That's why women organizations like the Ladies Memorial Aid Society funded the monument through fundraisers and picnics where they were later joined by the Daughters of the Confederacy and other organizations. Their ideology is that of a lost cause, a white antebellum South, code for a white way of life. Read up on their story. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is John Sherritt. And sir, you got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Rowe, City Council members. My name is John Sherritt. I'm the commander of the Stonewall Camp and Sons of Confederate Veterans here in Portsmouth. And I'm also the vice president of Cedar Grove Cemetery in Portsmouth. Councilman Moody and Clark, I'd like to thank y'all for your opening remarks that kind of set the groundwork on some of the conversations that have been coming up. For the past 21 years, the Stonewall Camp has been working in Cedar Grove Cemetery, making repairs and improvements to what was a very deplorable situation for many years. During these 21 years, we have spent thousands of hours, thousands of our dollars, and over $10,000 of state grant taking care of all of Cedar Grove Cemetery. Regardless of whose tombstone it was, we would repair it if it was broke. There's only one really small road that goes through Cedar Grove Cemetery, and I don't see that working. I was there working about a month ago, and we were pouring some concrete to fix a ledger stone, and actually maneuvered my truck, my brand new truck, into one of the fences. It didn't hurt the fence, but it sure hurt my pride in my truck, you know. So we go over there and we do a lot. This city does not own the property where the monument sits, which has been brought up prior, nor does it own the monument, and it is protected by state law. If you read yesterday's Virginia Pilot, it was made very clear that it's protected. Portsmouth City Council donated the land to build a monument on March 8, 1876, and it was donated to the Portsmouth Norfolk County Monument Association. The way this country has gone crazy about the history of slavery and want to destroy everything related must stop, or we will destroy our own country. Probably the last thing that will go will be our U.S. flag, because every slave brought into this country came in under that flag. Not one slave came into this country under the Confederate flag. Moving the monument is not going to satisfy the people that want it totally removed. They will come back and say it is offensive and it's on city property. The cost that has been quoted to remove the monument or move it does not include any cost for ground preparation at another site or erecting it back in its place. As was stated earlier, this could cost $500,000 before it's all over with. The Stonewall Camp is against moving the monument, and if you vote to move it, we will file an injunction to halt any action. Here's a point to really ponder. You want to relocate a monument that was erected in remembrance of the sacrifices of our ancestors, both black and white, whose efforts were to protect our city and state from the invading Union Army. But you allow a statue on the corner of a statue of slave owner Colonel William Crawford on the corner of High and Crawford Street to remain in place. This is one that you can remove and not break the law. I guess the people that walk by the Confederate monument are offended, but do not walk the 2 blocks to the Colonel Crawford statue, who was a slaveholder. I must say I applaud what Claude said. I've never met him. But his idea of putting a bench with a black and white Confederate soldier really hit me strong. I believe that could help mend our problem. And finally I would like to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed being here tonight. I have learned a lot, and I have learned a lot from some of the people that had different ideas, like Clyde and some of the others. I thank you for my time.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Kent Morris. And, sir, you got 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, Council, my name is Kent Morris. I grew up here in Portsmouth, went to school at the same school Mr. Whitaker did, worked with your mother in the Navy Yard many years ago. My dad, I'm the son of General Hank Morris, who's a resident here in Portsmouth. If you don't know him or didn't know him, he was a resident in Portsmouth. He was the guy that spearheaded the effort to save and preserve the historical significance of Cedar Grove Cemetery, along with John's guys. He also worked tirelessly to get the Confederate monument placed on the National Registry of Historic Sites. Anyone who's waded through the miles of bureaucracy can tell you this is a massive effort and spanned many years he worked on this. For this and other reasons, the question of saving the monument is very personal to me and my family. It's part of my dad's legacy. My father did a lot of research and helped prepare all the documents and the paperwork, and he let his co-worker submit it all because he was a retired general. He didn't need any more recognition. He didn't need any more attention. My father would be horrified to hear what is occurring to this monument and to the city that he cherished. He worked hard to preserve this city's history, and as a Portsmouth citizen, a military man, historian, and a scholar, he well knew what that monument represented. That monument stands as a remembrance to the men and boys who never made it home, the ones who never had a proper funeral or burial. It was closure for the widows and the orphans. My family members fought and died in the Civil War. The revisionists have run amok today, rewriting and recreating the true facts about the Civil War and the South's position in the war. But the fact is, Portsmouth suffered greatly through the war, and even more so when Portsmouth fell to the enemy. And after the war, hundreds of Portsmouth sons never returned home. You're welcome to read Portsmouth Under Four Flags. You can learn a lot more about how Portsmouth suffered under the occupation of Union troops. It was bloody, it was violent, it was horrific. We were invaded. My family's members and others took up arms to defend their homes and land. Nobody in my family owned any slaves. We weren't fighting for no daggone slaves. I am prepared to put my life on the line for that monument and to preserve it right in the exact spot that it is today. How many of you guys are willing to put your life on the line to do what you know in your heart is wrong, and that's remove it? How many? How many in the community are willing to do the same? I fully intend to lock and chain myself to that monument to protect it right where it sits. I've got plenty of support from my family and friends and other Southern sympathizers, and they're willing to do anything they can to assist me to continue my position. I intend this stance to be a peaceful protest in accordance with the law, but if anybody so much as puts a hand on me, I'm going to have you arrested for assault. And Mr. Whitaker, before you attempt to tell me my history is wrong, I can assure you and everyone here in attendance that my history that I've shared here is accurate, it's honest, thoroughly researched, and I suggest you also do research that extends beyond your comfort zone and your well-entrenched belief system. Otherwise, you present yourself as no more than an uneducated
Sir.
as uneducated
Sir,
in your
sir.
country's true history and have no real knowledge of true history other than things you want to dream up.
Sir,
Also, I believe in Dr.
you're
King's
out of
dream,
order,
too.
sir. No personal attacks.
That wasn't an attack.
In my opinion, it was, and you're out of order. Please conclude your remarks.
I believe in Mr. King's dream, too. So I don't want to bring that
Your
up.
time is up.
Thank you much.
Next speaker is Frank Ernest. And sir, you got 5 minutes.
My name is Frank Ernest. I'm a Virginian whose children were born here in Portsmouth. They were born in building number 1 of the Portsmouth Naval Hospital, which was once a Confederate hospital. Thank God it's on federal property, so it can't be torn down. 2 things, well, I've heard so many things here tonight, but 2 brief things because they really have nothing to do with why we're here. This country was built on a revolution. The first document before the Constitution is the Declaration of Independence, and it talks about standing up to your own government when you feel it's wrong. The British called our ancestors, George Washington and the like, rebels. Also, both Generals Lee and Generals Grant were taught at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, where they were taught that secession is perfectly legal. But I don't want to go over history and refight the war. I don't want to go over the Confederacy. I don't want to go over slavery. I want to talk about now. I've stood before this body before. I've stood before the Norfolk body, City Council, Richmond, and most recently, Charlottesville. Long before what happened to Charlottesville, maybe 2 weeks ago on the 12th, I was at the City Council meeting where the vote was taken to move down, take down the General Lee and General Jackson monuments. I want to commend this council. I don't say I agree with you, but I want to commend you. Long before that violence you saw in Charlottesville, I thought I was in a third world country when I went to their city council. It's nothing like this. You know, there, ladies and gentlemen, there's ladies and gentlemen behind me. They'll say that, I know I'm addressing y'all. The council was yelling at the people. The people were yelling back in the council. This was months ago before any of this happened. Anyone should have seen what was coming in Charlottesville. Charlottesville suffered a self-inflicted wound. Tell you another truth. Well, I did not like what I heard here as part of the problem, not acknowledging that there are 2 groups, opposite but equally evil, that oppose each other. They oppose things in our country, things that hopefully the people in this room, I think we'd all agree on American principles, not the things these people believe in. All Charlottesville did was give them a battleground. The ones on the right didn't come to protect the monument. The ones on the left didn't come to protect free speech or minorities or whatever they were claiming to protect. They were 2 evil groups that wanted a battleground, and Charlottesville gave it to them. I urge you, I was there in Charlottesville the night before, and I left. They're on legitimate business. A lot of folks told me they were staying in or leaving the town. It was horrible what happened in Charlottesville. I just advise you, before you rush into anything, and I know you did agree to look into the law, and I trust me, believe me, I've got it on advice of counsel. There is the law in Virginia, can't move war memorials, not Confederate, war memorials, and that's what this is. So before you rush into anything, and obviously this is about not wanting another Charlottesville. I was in Richmond Council when they said, we don't want another Charlottesville, and I don't think you're all going to argue you don't want another Charlottesville. I advise you, take everybody's feelings into considerations. Move slowly and deliberately, and let's resolve this way in a way that doesn't result in what we've seen in Charlottesville. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Ernest, I just wanted to thank you for recognizing although there's obviously a lot of disagreement on this council, I think we'll be able to leave here and come back and take care of the business of the city with this issue put in its own little compartment. That compartment's pretty big, but I think we'll be able to do business going forward. And speaking of business, you know, we talked a lot about historic figures tonight. Really, the figures, and we've spent a lot of time talking about something that happened 150 years ago, but the real figures that we should be discussing and working to resolve is our unemployment rate in Portsmouth, one of the highest in the regions at over 5%. Our job growth is a minus 0.22%. We've had 38 drug deaths as reported in one of the most recent census. Our per capita income is $23,000. Our median income's only in the 40s. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think this council is capable of reversing those figures. But the time that we expended on this should not have been an issue right now. We can have a conversation on it, but we can't get wrapped around the axle and lose focus of what you hired us for. You didn't hire us to talk about resolving 150-year-old issues. You want life improved right now in the present time, and we can all be slaves to high unemployment rates, low income levels. That makes slaves out of all of us. Nationwide, here Chicago had President Lincoln, somebody set that on fire. Yet they had, so far this year, they've had 448 homicides. So, there are a lot of issues. This is not the most pressing issue for this city. We even had our mortality, 16% of births end up infant deaths. And we're talking about a 150-year-old problem of what started the Civil War. By golly, scholars can't even determine that 150 years later. So let's get back to work on doing the business of the city. And we got a deed on the monument. We don't own it. So let's get on with the work. But thank you, Mr. Ernest. You put it in proper context, as Mayor Hollywood has said. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Philip Van Cleve. And sir, you got 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, well, this is totally different. This is a different subject. I had left a message for you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure you were busy getting prepared for all the meetings you had today in this, so you probably hadn't seen it. And I also had left a message for Mr. Ashby, and again, I'm sure he was busy getting ready. This deals with, I'm the president of a gun rights organization called the Virginia Citizens Defense League. And we're an organization with about 6,000 members. And one of the things we do is we keep a lookout for any violations of firearms laws in Virginia. And I saw one of our members forwarded a video of a news story where you guys were looking at ways to control giving out permits for rallies or protests and so forth. And you were basically looking at ideas, not saying you were doing it, you were researching it. One of those ideas was, well, can we not give the permit out if they have firearms? Can we ban weapons in general? And that immediately caught my attention, and I wanted to save you guys a little bit of time, and I gave the code section and everything to your attorney. The answer to that is no. In Virginia, the code section 15.2-915 takes away all such powers from local government. You can control shooting and hunting, and that's pretty much it through ordinances, but nothing about purchase, carry, transport of firearms. Now, you could control baseball bats and golf clubs, and and you already have laws against masks in Virginia. I think that's a felony. That should be enforced. But that's what this was about. I just wanted to make sure, and I drove here 2 hours from Richmond just to make sure that you guys didn't waste time going off on a tangent where we would then have to come around and look at correcting it through the court system. So, if you have any questions or anything, I'd be glad to answer it. Otherwise, I'll give up my rest of my 5 minutes. Good? Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Last speaker is Sheila Joseph. Sheila Joseph, and you've got 5 minutes.
My name is Sheila Joseph, 139 Grand Street, Portsmouth, Virginia. I would like to say thank you for this opportunity. I wanted to speak a little bit about when we was at the monument last Thursday, that I actually did a lot of footage on everything was said, and I gave each individual, those that opposed or for those that were for it. And I wanted to know straight from the hearts of the people that was out there how they felt about the monument staying or leaving. And they gave their opinion. But I also let them know my opinion. And I recall last year speaking on that the monument was there for, 100 years or whatever amount of years it was. And I did notice it, and nobody didn't know except for my family. I was taking pictures of it. Not to say that I liked the idea that it was there, but to show people that they didn't recognize the black military men that served on the front line and died. And it wasn't showing the black, they just show 4 statues of the white of 4 branches. So we addressed the different issues, and yes, some people from Old Town rised up and was being negative, saying something to the young man that came back, and he was only expressing to us what he saw in Charlottesville. And the person wanted to question him where he was from, even though he was from another city, but he had been in Portsmouth for 20 years. And I just wanted to say that my family was from Southampton County, where Nat Turner was from. But I'm saying this, that my father moved here. I was born in Norfolk, Virginia, and lived in Portsmouth, Virginia for 63 years. And I feel that I had a right to be there to give my opinion, not because I was from another neighborhood in somebody else's neighborhood, that something was placed there that the black people didn't have any control of, or what somebody else had money and they didn't back in that time. But now I look at it as a new time that we have, and we have a new generation of people. And I feel that moving the monument, it kind of changed my mind a little bit to hear that it would be nice to move it by the grave. And I don't have a problem with that. But I also want to say, personally from me, I don't want to see taxpayers be doing it. I would love to see grant money and people raise money that wants to disassimilate so it won't get damaged, And I want to keep the peace among us as people. I don't want a statue or image to be something that we have to be divided over. And I also said to them, just like this flag here, you see how the person is standing on the chest of the man. Well, we are dealing with something like that every day. We feel that the people that in leadership sometimes dictate what we do in our own personal life. And I did say to everyone out there, you're a modern slave, and it ain't just black people, it's all people. And so therefore, I have a reason why to say that, because every day you work like a dog, but somebody else is taking your money before you get it. I just want to put that out there. And I want people to be more conscious about unity. When you come in a unified mind and respect each other's thoughts, and like I told them, I don't know how you was raised, I don't know how you was raised, and you don't know how I was raised. But a lot of people were raised to believe certain things, and they teach their children in their home. So when they come up in negative environment in their home, they're gonna display it out. Another part I wanted to address tonight while I'm here, from October to now, no one had said anything to me as a flood victim. FEMA didn't do anything. They promised to do something. The city of Portsmouth didn't do anything. And my insurance didn't do anything because I was told that I wasn't in a flood zone, but I found out January the 3rd, it says on the document I wasn't, but I got flooded.
Ma'am, your time is up.
All right. You have a good day.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our agenda and our speakers, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for attending.